Hello on this very lovely Friday. I hope everyone's doing well. It's been a long fucking week for me. I tried to get up the energy to stream multiple times, but I got a new, because as much as it may shock you, deleuze in the QC doesn't pay the bills. So I got a new consulting gig working with a company building some shit, but it's been, I think I've put in almost 30 hours in 3 days, and it's kind of just melting me. It's nothing like, it's a whole thing. They have great people, crazy project, as it goes. Especially as we have all this crazy shit that's happening in the real world. And I wanted to, also, before I started streaming, I wanted to be able to find a place that I can make sure that I'm not deviating too much from the mission of all this, which is to bring up and discuss the nature of capital, the nature of the Deleuzian critique of it and those around him. And the reality is, it is not easy to find an easy in. So it's going to be a depressing stream for a good part of this because there's a very, very serious reality that I want to make sure we get a chance to sort of talk about, that is going to be coming down the pipe to a whole bunch of people, and that is that Social Security is on the verge of failing. Social Security is not a small thing. Social Security is one of the more important parts of the entirety of our economy, and it's been a lot. This is just water. I know, Wig. It's exciting, isn't it? I know. But we're in a place where Social Security is on the verge of falling apart. If you have not been paying attention to the news, the DOGE administration, one second, let me bring up an article and we can discuss that. It's a really... We're in a really bad place. Like fuck it, let's do it. Let's just jump right into this shit. Newsweek article, nice and exciting. Former Social Security Commissioner Martin O'Malley has warned the Trump administration's proposed changes to Social Security Administration could lead to missed payments and the collapse of the system. This is a very light way of saying it. This is not at all what he stated. To quote him, "We are already seeing service timelines skyrocket, but then you're going to see intermittent interruptions of the processing and claim system. Ultimately, an interruption in benefits," O'Malley told WPXI in Pittsburgh. The agency and the hardworking people up there at Woodlawn pride themselves on the fact they've never missed a payment in 90 years. Which, by the way, is the entirety of the existence of Social Security, just to put in context that amount of time. Whole thing. And they're going after it. And they're doing it in ways that are very difficult to be angry about. They're going after bureaucrats. They're saying they can close offices. They don't need as many offices as they have. We need to save on real estate because they're forcing everyone to come back into the office. So now they need to save on real estate. Again, red herring, red herring, red herring. Slowly working up to the point where Social Security will simply be in trouble. What's the effect of missing benefits? Half of all seniors who are living alone depend entirely upon Social Security payment to keep them out of poverty. And this is where you start talking about, how does this matter? And I found this article, like all the other articles, woefully underinformed and underdefined in what actually is going to be happening here. Their answer: more than 70 million people in the U.S. rely on Social Security benefits, including retirees and individuals with disabilities, some of the most vulnerable members of society. That's statistics. This is not how it will matter, because that is an abstract, nothing, non-vital, disconnected way to talk about what is genuinely the backbone of the modern American experiment. So, what I want to do, and what I have been doing in my spare time over the last, 5-6 days, is getting numbers, getting statistics, tracking downstream how things affect each other, and talking about actually how everything's going to collapse. And this is in here. I'm happy to talk about sources if you want. I'm not going to go over them. The sources are primarily the U.S. government. You can find these things kind of throughout. If you didn't know, the U.S. government basically shares everything that they always do and all the dollars. You can go through, and it just takes time to understand specifically what one thing or another means. For example, the way that we talk about consumer spending. We talk about consumer units. You are not a consumer unit, neither am I. My household is a consumer unit. If you live alone, your household is still a consumer unit. A consumer unit is considered a household. Household can be one person, many people, 2 people, 3 people, 1.5 people, whatever it is, but it's considered a cohesive unit. It means a general mixed mingling of funds. It means a mixed mingling of utilities, rent, food, other things. They consider that singular purchase. The reason we do this is because you can't talk about my wife and I as 2 consumers. We do buy separate things, but we are a single consumer unit. So, this is what will happen if Social Security has payment delays. And payment delays is probably the most likely outcome of this, missing 1 or 2 payments or having it generally delayed. If the budget that is currently up for proposal passes, my second scenario, which we'll get to, is going to happen, because the reality of cutting $880 billion from Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security, which rely on each other ultimately, will see a total collapse of that system. And there's no sort of way around that as a thing. There just simply isn't. So, we're going to spend some time going through this, and I look forward to questions. I look forward to thoughts, but this is the closest I've got to actually the outcome of this. So up front, we need to talk about the numbers. $1.4 trillion is what Social Security is distributed annually, every year. There are 67 million beneficiaries. They round up to 70, but really it's 67 million all in. Oh, predicting the future is dicey? This is not really predicting the future. This is terrifying. I found this terrifying. So I'm excited. We'll see if you disagree. Every monthly set of payments that goes out is $117 billion. Every week is $27 billion. This is what it is. When we have the moment, for example, we have administrative collapse, where they reduce the workforce, which they are already doing, trying to cut it, as they've said, in half. But if we just reduce it from 60,000 to 35 to 40,000, government agencies across the board and people who've worked there have talked about how that immediately creates not just a processing backlog for applications and appeals, but you cannot then process claims. The large number of people that exist in the Social Security Administration process claims, and claims are constant. Everything is a claim within this sort of system. People getting on Social Security, people changing their address, people having anything that happens, those claims back up. And it's everyone in the United States collectively who's on this. Again, 67 million people. You've got a huge number of claims that get added. 5 to 6 million annually is the number that they've talked about. If there is a 2-week delay, that's 2 weekly payments of $54 billion that does not enter the economy. That's it. That's all we're saying. I'm not saying that Social Security overall collapses, just a 2-week delay of $54 billion not being in this. Let's say it shows up after that. That's, again, my assumption is that after 2 weeks, it will show up. So we're hoping that that's the case. That's the best case scenario. Here's the reason that this starts really being a problem. 40% of elderly who rely on Social Security do so for 90% of their income. It's a very important statistic. There's a good number of people who have 401ks, or they have family, or they live with family, or they have other income sources, or rentals that are coming to them. There's a lot of shifts in what sort of comes into that, or they're working, which is horrifying. But 40% of all the elderly who rely on it, it's 90% of their total income. They will simply immediately face total crisis. Not a small amount, but total crisis. These people live hand to mouth, paycheck to paycheck, Social Security check to Social Security check. They will not have food. 15 to 20 million people will miss mortgage payments or rent payments. That's the presumption around households, because we know generally how those numbers go out. This is the number of people who have on Social Security have active mortgage or rent payments. They keep these statistics. Prescription medications overall will go unfilled because they cost, on average, $300 to $500 monthly for most seniors, so they won't get medication. And food insecurity will simply spike for around 10 million total recipients. This is not a small thing when we talk about this. There's no nice way to have this conversation. Food insecurity means they simply, for what we can talk about for 2 weeks, and it will not just be 2 weeks, no matter what happens, 10 million people will simply be food insecure, choosing whether or not to eat, choosing what they eat, rationing the food that they have because they can't buy more. But it's not just them. Again, for the first 2 weeks, retail spending, which is about half of all the money that Social Security puts out, goes into retail spending. We will see in that 2 weeks a drop of $20 to $25 billion in consumer spending. This is not a small amount. Social Security overall, because it is primarily completely digested by people who are consumers and goes out, you have absolutely 100% of it, is 98% gets spent as it happens. When we have a consumer spend of $8.4 trillion a year and $1.7 trillion of that is literally these checks of Social Security, that's not a small amount. It's a 20%, 25%, depending on the month or the year, of all spending that happens. Again, consider that. Grocery stores in high retirement areas. This is a big deal. When you have a college town, for example, they will not be hit in the same way as quickly because they do not have people on Social Security. But retirement communities with significant old people, Florida is going to be filled with them, but you all know the areas of your city that this is the case of. They will overall just see revenue drop. They estimate anywhere between 15 and 20% because that's the percentage of seniors and how they spend versus what the rest of the spending is. Pharmacy chains will have a 10% or 15% prescription volume decline. That is not a small thing to happen. It is, again, the nature of the supply chains. And all of it, of course, because Medicare and Medicaid are tied to all of this. You cannot have payments delayed, and they will, because people will not be able to cover their copays. And there are copays in the US for all of this shit. So you'll see all of this with immediate hardship, difficulty for people across the board. But it doesn't stop just in that 2 weeks. And yes, we are dooming super fucking hard. Super fucking hard. Thomas says 70 million folks, 27 billion. In contrast, 650,000 deer licenses sold, 130,000 gang members in Chicago. Nobody's moving that army. 120,000 bow deer lines sold. I got X. I have no idea what you're schizoing out on. But welcome to the chat, I guess. I have no idea what you're schizoing out on. For those who just got here, the presumption is, at this point, with the cuts, as again, to just quote the former head of the Social Security Administration, the way that the cuts are currently proposed is we will begin to see delays. We're already seeing service timelines skyrocket, and we will see delays. When this happens and how this happens is kind of the big deal. The administration's plan to cut 7,000 jobs would lead to the loss of an enormous amount of knowledge. And the way that that sort of comes down and shows up is through a just generalized delay. When we make our move beyond that first 2 weeks and we get into the next setup of this, we need to understand, again, Social Security, which is a huge amount for people, $1,900 a person, a household of two, you're talking about just shy of $4,000. A lot of elderly and people living in condos in these elderly communities, this is their entirety of their mortgage payment that simply will not show up for 2 weeks. We can hope that it's just the 2 weeks, but at that point, there will simply be a mortgage delinquency. They do not catch back up. Social Security is not set up to simply catch back up. They won't give you an extra set of checks, but we're hoping, in best case scenario, that they're able to continue working. Our financial system is so tightly tied together that in that time, we will see a 5 to 10% spike in mortgage delinquencies in retirement-heavy regions. Florida is filled with this. A lot of areas are, but Florida is filled with this. The people who have this will necessarily immediately jump into their credit cards, and they will just immediately bridge that gap with insane interest rates. If you didn't know, we're in usury territory. 30 plus 40% APR is where a lot of credit cards are now. We'll see payday lenders go up 30-40%. You will see late fees and interest accumulation among recipients grow. And suddenly, that late fee, that thing now forces retirees and Social Security people to not make their payments. Once you're late, for anyone who's had to use a payday loan, you know exactly how that goes. You never catch up unless you are fortunate enough to come into a big surprise amount of money. If you're on Social Security, you do not come into big, exciting money. You come into steady, simple money every single week. And so people will never catch back up. And so they will eternally be paying back these loans. That's just the strain on the financial system. And that debt is not good for us, because that is debt that is being held, consumed by one or two companies, that's no longer being spent externally into the entirety of the economy. The healthcare system impact is going to be fucking crazy. It's crazy. Multiple reports I read talked about emergency room visits spiking when there are delays. From what I'm able to tell, we're talking about an 8 to 12% general lump of all of those moving to emergency care, because preventative care, which requires copays, simply won't be taken care of. And again, these are marginalized edge of the world communities that have this. The elderly, the older, the people who are sick, the people who are prone to falls and getting hurt, they will take a not going over going and not being able to afford it or being turned away. You will see emergency rooms filled. Medication adherence will drop. This will increase chronic conditions across the board for everyone. You don't just miss 2 weeks of a medication for Alzheimer's or for epilepsy or for any of these other things and not have knock-on effects, especially with a lot of the medications that older people are on, people on Social Security. Nursing homes themselves will have delayed payments across the board. This will be a huge crunch in that sector. You're talking billions of dollars in delayed payments that they will be trying to figure out how to make up for in other ways. And they will make up for it in other ways. Not good ways, but they'll make up for it if they can. Medicare, of course, because they're connected to SSA, will continue having processing delays. As we've cut people back and we aren't able to get to people and we aren't able to have someone fix things, this will continue to be the case. This will be absolutely happening across the board. And overall, health incomes deteriorating. Locally, though, pick a town, pick a city. Retirement communities make up, as I said in the first bit, 15 to 20 to 25% of all revenue that is spent inside of retirement communities, because they are that large segment. They're 20 to 25%. Their spending is all consumption. Families spend less money outwardly as retirees or people on Social Security because they are literally on hand-to-mouth paychecks. With this, though, property taxes will begin to be a thing that people put off or hold off on because they simply are on a fixed income and they can't afford it. You make choices where you can. The property tax thing is going to be a problem. It was in 2007 and 2008. We saw a huge amount of foreclosures in horrifying ways that we were never able to get back on the ground with. And of course, businesses were happy with this. They were able to buy all of those properties. They were super excited to buy all of those properties. And there's already talk that there's going to be a huge collapse of foreclosures, and people are already putting money into large-scale real estate firms towards it. It's where capital's moving. Capital's not moving into VCs anymore. It's now into portfolios of real estate. Enjoy that. With that, though, becomes your municipal services. Police, firemen, whatever it may be. Sewage, fucking name a thing. Road maintenance. It doesn't even matter. You're talking incredible budget shortfalls on already tight places. People who are in these retiree groups don't live in, the hottest, brightest, most expensive neighborhoods in the world. Generally speaking, retiree communities, especially ones with high percentages of them, are not like the fantasy lands that they have in like weird Florida nightmare towns, but they're instead in poorer areas that rely a huge amount on absolutely those sales taxes, that rely on local taxes, and you will see a shortfall there. And all of that will see price decreasing as there's a huge surge of homes and condos and real estate that enter the market, and you will see a collapse as forced home sales increase. That's it. And you will see layoffs immediately from this. It's absolutely stunning. Again, this is not a question of like, hey, if we delay by 2 weeks, is this possible? This is the literal order of things. Unless by delaying it or having a missed payment, they immediately make up for it by doubling the next payment, which, again, it's unprecedented. We have no idea what people do. But if anyone here thinks this administration will literally double the next payment in order to make up for it, you're fucking silly. You're fucking silly. I think it's completely reasonable to expect delays. When we talk about how this moves on to then months 2 through 6, because again, this is not the thing we come back from. This is something that is going to sit and is going to last with us. That much money being removed from the economy or not put into it, which is effectively being removed since our economy is built on rentier capital, that thing is a hole. And until that hole is filled, which it won't be, we have problems. 2 to 6 months, you're very specifically talking about people who are in that very specific category of Social Security disability, where 2 to 3 million working age people utilize that extra bit to maintain their employment. They can't actually afford to have their lives because they are on disability. They have disability. They're working, they're trying to survive, but they need disability to make up for it. They will not be able to maintain their employment because as that goes away, as they have desperation, they will not be able to secure that. Family caregivers, which is another group that Social Security pays for, they will absolutely not be able to take care of their loved ones for pay anymore. They won't. That, if you didn't know, 1 million to 2 million people on Social Security are actually being paid to take care of their loved ones. It's a great program. I think is beautiful. And it's certainly not something I'm against. That thing, they will not be paid for their work hours. As that happens, because there is a shortfall in money, you will see people not taking care of the elderly in their lives. You will see dissociation there. And the 10 million part-time working seniors will not be able to make their excess spends anymore because they're making up for all of these ongoing late fees, all of these extra charges, and probably rent as they've been foreclosed on, or they're losing their home, or they're having to move, or unexpected charges. It's a huge amount of consumer spending that is no longer happening just regularly because it is being taken up by these rentiers. The home healthcare industry, from the stats I could find, has around 100 to 200,000, depending on the reports you talk to, jobs that are paid for wholly. They're external. They're people who do not have family to do this, or family who won't be doing this, but they're nurses, home caregivers, whatever it is, caretakers of various sorts that are paid by these programs. Those jobs will go away. Those jobs will just go away. That's the labor market. Financial sector, you will see, as we saw in 2008, as we saw in 99 with the internet crash, you will see regional banks who have the highest exposure to retirement communities. It's always regional banks who get completely fucked first, will have absolute and total liquidity constraints for months. I don't foresee how we don't end up here. The 50 to 75 billion in retirement assets will become withdrawn. There's this great trick that was played on the American people where we had 401ks supplant people's actual pensions, and companies began pushing for those. Those are things that are sitting there and waiting, and a lot of people are hoping to be able to leave something to their children or hoping to use it in a rainy day. Well, this will be the rainy day, and you will withdraw assets with penalties, which again, money taken out of the economy, money taken out of consumption, money not left to the consumer, completely fucked. And this is where we start getting into the dry stuff that matters way more than people want to talk about. The bond markets, which is an insane thing to say how this affects, absolutely will be impacted. They will have volatility as confidence will completely bottom out. It's absolutely awful. 90 years, you have a system that is completely stable. If we have a missed payment, the lack of confidence in that is what spooks investors, which is what bonds are for. Bonds are for long-term long-term investment types, stability. Hey, I want to buy bonds because it's safe. It's not safe if we miss this. It starts becoming that the lack of stability will crumble all of this. With this, of course, insurance premiums going up as actuarial calculations shift. And we're talking about home insurance. We're talking about mortgage insurance. We're talking about health insurance. We're talking about everything. As actuarial tables will shift because of all this. And if we have a government response, because I wanted to say, let's assume they're not completely useless. What is the bond market? Let's talk about the bond market. What are bonds? Let's do it. NerdWallet's always good. You'll see bonds a lot coming up that you can purchase. Financial advisors will recommend them to you, things like that. A bond is a loan to a company or government, generally government, that pays investors a fixed rate of return. Borrower uses the money to fund its operations. The investor receives interest on the investments. Bonds are a key ingredient in a balanced portfolio, blah, blah, to the end user. Let's talk about the types of bonds. Treasury bonds are a big deal. Corporate, they're the safest. They're called the safest because the U.S. government backs them. Treasury bonds are classically, and again, I'm going to date myself here, but it's the kind of thing that once upon a time, parents would buy for their kids. War bonds was a thing for my parents' generation. For my generation, government bonds was a thing that, you know, your grandparents would buy you because it's a safe, ongoing rate of return and blah, blah. It's a thing. Bonds are used often for cities or companies or other things to do large-scale sort of improvements. San Francisco has bonds all the time for a building that's being built. They want to build a new city area, a new thing, whatever it may be. They issue bonds. People buy the bonds because they're generally very safe, and the city gets extra money to do its thing. The bonds are effectively longer sort of term debt, but it's a security debt. It's securitized debt from the U.S. government. It's regular. It's about confidence. And the moment that shit goes away, and it's not confident anymore, you're talking about the end of people investing in bonds, which is like, that's a hell of a sentence to say as a realistic possible outcome. And again, this isn't the worst case scenario. This is if we miss 2 weeks of Social Security payments. 2 weeks. But let's say the government responds. If they fund $10 to $15 billion needed for a temporary staffing surge in order to make up for it, which it would take that much. Fucking crazy in order to get to this place. All of this would yield an insane turnaround if they decide they want to fix it. They will have to throw silly amounts of money that make 7,000 employees seem like a goddamn joke. Especially if, and the last note I have there is, I don't see how the Reserve doesn't adjust its monetary policy and change rates in a way that will counter what is absolutely deflationary. Like, this is the shit that scares the living hell out of me. This scares, I am generally not a doomer. Anyone who's been around or watched the stream knows that I don't believe in doomer. I don't like doing that. I don't have that consideration. But we aren't talking about a narrative here. This isn't, oh no, Trump's the worst person ever, and oh no, he's going to do this or that, or whatever it may be. We aren't talking about possibilities and things. We're talking about if we hit a point where we reduce the number of people who work at Social Security Administration to the point where we have a 2-week delay. That's it. Music disagrees? I've got my vaporwave always. I'm a fan of it. I guess my music is a little doomy. It's a little doomy. I like it. But this is a bare minimum. They are actively cutting Social Security. The new budget cuts it. They've talked about how they're going after Social Security. They've been aiming at it, but it's usually been, as someone else in the chat has said, it has been a third rail for a very long time. Third rail means explicitly, we're not going to touch it. We're not going after it. I'm not going to fuck with it, because if I fuck with this thing, I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit. If we fuck with this, people will rebel and riot. And I believe they will. But I also believe these people are stupid enough to think, because they were with Twitter, that if you just cut enough people, things will get weird, but it'll be okay. It won't. This is not, government programs are not like businesses. They are not like tech stacks. This is not how these things function. The government, the state, in order for a modern economy to work, has to be reliable and consistent. The moment that breaks, we have a very different discussion. This is what I see enough to be the good outcome. I want to talk about doomer. This is the good outcome. This is, as I said, presuming something very simple. They just cut 20, 30, 40% of the workforce because they want to get away with it. They have a backlog, and you run into just generally a delay in just 2 payments. Now, let's talk of something completely different. Let's say they do the thing. Let's say they just don't really have it work again. Let's just say they just fuck up and they can't get it back. Or let's say that they do the thing they've wanted to, and in this nightmare, they move it into private securitized stocks, and like everyone's 401ks, loses all the wealth to that, or just stops payments entirely. Think about this. Social Security as a thing. This is not a program you can just stop. They're talking about it like this, and I'm seeing people talk about, look, what's the worst? Well, indeed, what is the worst? Immediately, we move into a completely different place. Week 1, when it stopped, we do not believe it's coming back. Again, this is the doomer of doomerism. There's no income for 67 million Americans. And by no income, I mean none. Nothing. They've got nothing for food, nothing for rent, nothing for water, nothing for utilities, nothing for cable, nothing for internet, nothing for spending at the mall. It's done. Within days, you have 12 million people that are pushed below the poverty line. When we know it's not coming back, everything changes. Housing insecurity as before, 25 million recipients not affording prescription medications. Food banks and emergency services would be overwhelmed within 3 days. Lenin had the line, society is always 3 meals away from collapse. He's not wrong. We have a lot of people dependent on this money. But again, presuming it comes back in 2 weeks, or we're talking about it that way, it's not this outcome. But if they say, look, we're going to fix it, but we don't know when and we don't know how. Consumer spending. 20 to 25% of all consumer spending comes from Social Security. Rich people do not spend money. If you don't know how the economy works, allow me to explain this. Poor people spend all of their income. Rich people spend a very, very, very tiny amount. The consumer markets are powered by consumer spending. Consumer spending is about $8 trillion a year. $1.7 trillion a year is Social Security. When that goes away, you will see a contraction in the markets, the likes of which we've never seen. I do not foresee it being anything less than 20 to 30% crash, because it's a 20 to 30% hole in the consumer market. Gone. AI and everything that's powering the consumer the stock market and all this stupidity, all this shit is predicated on the idea that they're going to be creating things that people want to consume, that people will be able to have Netflix accounts. How many Netflix accounts do you think are Social Security paid? A lot. As 40 million accounts plus suddenly turn negative, which they would immediately because of auto pay, because of overdrafts, because of people who live hand to mouth, which again, 60% of Americans are paycheck to paycheck. Social Security people, they're in that group. So the banking system would immediately have a liquidity crisis. They would just have an extraordinary number of overcharges and just be fucked. The bond markets would move in really, really horrifying ways. Treasury yields would spike beyond words, and suddenly we'd have this really weird, unprecedented reaction to that. I actually don't know what would come from that. I have theories, but horrifying. Food stamps does not keep the stores profitable. Guess what pays out food stamps? These programs. Food stamps don't pay out unless someone cashes them in. EBT doesn't actually make a store money. They have to go get that from programs that literally the Trump administration's actively already trying to undermine or is working with Congress to stop. WIC, for example, WIC is going to be gone. There's multiple healthy food groups that gone, programs gone. All of that's gone. Like partly already, actually. With this, you would see a huge drop. Everyone would immediately pull out every retirement asset they have. From what I can tell, it's around $300 million. It might be less than that. It may not be everyone pulling out, but the way that this gets pulled out has massive penalties. There are rules about when you can pull it out, even if you're already retired. You can't just do a big chunk and go take it to the dog track. When people do pull it all out, and they will, because when the stock market contracts and people have their 401ks and they see that, they will pull out all their money. They will take the fucking hit because it's better than watching the stock markets crash. This will yield a awful, awful spin and spiral around the drain. I can't even think about it. It's awful. When the housing market, which will happen, it will collapse 15 to 20% price crash across the board. But a huge amount of wealth is in those homes, which will again yield problems as we go on. And across the board, the mortgage-backed securities, which power the economy thanks to the fact we didn't re-regulate after 2008, credit default swaps, all that awful shit that they did that caused 2008. They basically do that. They do it a lot with commercial stuff. But mortgage-backed securities will have a 30 to 40% default rate. That will spike. 2008 will seem like a joke. And that's within the first 2 weeks, unless we have it coming back. If we know it's coming back, this is avoided. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? I think it's fun. Within that first 1 to 3 months, we will lose $70 billion, 50 to 70 billion a month in retail sales. That's, again, very difficult to understand, but when you start talking about the entirety of Walmart and how much Social Security goes through them and the crunch that retail will feel when suddenly, again, 1/5 of the economy doesn't have the money that they were spending and that was being counted on for ongoing revenue for these people. Automobile sales will die. They're already completely fucked. I cannot see it going less than this. Housing transactions, people are not going to be buying houses. Houses are going to drop in price. What you'll see is foreclosures being purchased by portfolio groups. But people won't have the stability or the understanding of where they're going to have money when they retire. The stock market, people who have capital, which is a huge amount of the wealth that is sitting in banks, sitting in all these places, they will spend like mad. Most of us don't have that. And it will further decline everything. Retirees are known to travel. That will be the end of that. They make up 30 to 40% of all tourism dollars. Fun times. With that, again, despite being a smaller portion, just like with travel, retirees make up 1/3 of all medical sort of interventions that happen. They will simply go away. Ongoing, not emergency care. Specifically, it has to do with preventative, because Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security does pay for most of these things and takes care of those elements. But when you can't afford the copay, when you can't afford other elements, what are you going to do? Well, you're just not going to go, and you're going to see the medical industry collapse. This is horrifying. If you haven't noticed, by the way, this is really awful. Why is Wall Street not worried about this? They are. They're absolutely worried about this. So here's a tip for those of us who've fucked around in the world of capital and stocks. The Dow Jones doesn't mean anything. Nobody who's like in like the economy cash wise, they laugh when people talk about how the Dow went up or down. Like, it's not an indicator. Sometimes you'll hear people like talk about the Nikkei being an indicator. It still isn't. Those places, because the retail sector of stocks is so big, volatility of like 2 to 5% is like really boring and doesn't say anything. The Dow Jones going down 2% is fucking, who cares? Economic indicators are things like VCs having their money be actually deployed, or VCs not getting money to deploy at all. These are indicators that people are more aware of in these spaces, how capital is being deployed, where it's being deployed, and how it's being spent. And capital is not being deployed right now. You can go look in all of the VC handbooks. There's a lot of software that sort of does this. There's some reports that go out. You can go Google it. Capital is not being deployed. So they are Wall Street is terrified of what's happening right now. They are still working. They're still doing their thing. They think they're going to be able to come out of it because they have to, but it is not great right now. It's not great as a thing. Within 1 to 3 months, as Social Security doesn't pay out, you will see almost half of the nursing homes and elder care facilities simply close. Where will those people go? I don't know. I don't actually have that answer, and I couldn't quite figure out what we would do as a country when you have that many people simply within 1 to 3 months becoming homeless, destitute, and destroyed. I don't have that. Like, I don't know what to do with that. Again, pharmacies will close 20 to 30%. Businesses have realities, and when they no longer can depend on a set of revenue that they've literally had for 90 fucking years and that has been constant, why would they ever leave these things open? They won't. All of this, of course, means that grocery stores will see profit margins collapse into negative territory. Profit margins are tiny for grocery stores. If you have not paid attention to Kroger's earning reports, proper lefties should absolutely know all these things. You should understand how economics and stock markets work and how capital moves. You need to, because you have to understand how the world is happening around you and what implicates everything. When grocery stores' profit margins collapse, you will see them collapse across the board. And that puts us in a really weird place that we start getting into dream territory here. Well, nightmare territory, because I think it's very easy to see that when you have, again, the way I was looking at the Consumer Reports, it was around 19% of Social Security checks are deployed to grocery stores, food, things like that. So 19% of $1.7 trillion a year gone. And let me just really quick, Kroger P&L 2024. Kroger's profit, their operating profit in all of 2024 was $912 million. So, again, all of that, $912 million. Kroger runs a large number of grocery chains, like a huge number of them. One sec, I'm going to look up, and I'm looking at the earnings report. Give me 2 seconds. Company sales, like, again, they sell billions. It's insane how much money they sell. Their margins are fucking tiny. Their margins are tiny and silly. They're very silly. 420,000 associates with 11 million customers daily. Fuck me. We're in so much trouble. So $912 million was their operating profit, Q4. So let's raise it up. Let's make it so it's the year across, 4x that. So it's about $4 billion, just shy of $4 billion. In 3 months, we're talking about, got to do math. Math is fun. I like math. 2 seconds. Just 1 second. Boop, 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 boop. We'll go back to the first slide because the first slide I think had it in there. $117 billion monthly payments. So in 1 month, 20% of that, which is right, holy shit, $6 billion. No, that's not right. Holy fuck. Sorry, it's $30 billion. Sorry, my brain is, the numbers start. Is it more than $3 billion? Yes, that is spent on groceries. Gone. Just gone from the entirety of this. Just fucking gone. Grocery stores will dip into the negative within the first month, and it will continue, and they will have quarterly results that will be horrifying, and they won't know how to recover from that. Neither will their investors. They will have no idea what to do. What happens? Closing chains? Absolutely. Buying cheaper goods? Yes. Buying less food, buying more processed food? Maybe. What is able to be worked in here? Will dollar stores simply take over? I find this horrifying. When the financial system is hit, we're talking about months 1 through 3, there is a point. I know I didn't learn these numbers in high school. I didn't either. This is where we start talking about, again, how silly the idea of letting this happen is not. This is not small. My numbers are not crazy. There are people who are talking about like apocalypse style shit. I'm trying to be more reasonable about here's kind of what will happen and why, and here's the effects of things in the economy. Here is how much $117 billion a month impacts things. Because again, you have to remember, as a business owner, the stability of profit is what matters. If you can believe that you can steadily make X amount of dollars over the next year, you will do the thing that does that. When you suddenly don't have that stability, when you suddenly are losing it, when you're at the whims of X, Y, and Z, or when a huge chunk of money simply disappears, again, around 20% of consumer spending, 15%, just disappears overnight and doesn't come back, and we don't see a way. It's not like the elderly are going to start opening up startups. Like, that doesn't come back. The banking system is going to be completely broken. It's going to shatter. We had to put billions and billions, if not trillions, into it in 2008. I do not see us not coming close to eclipsing that. I was conservative with the thoughts, but the emergency liquidity is going to have to come from the US government. The default rates for credit cards is going to explode across all of this. Again, we're only in the first couple months when we have retail workers losing their jobs, when grocery stores go out, when they aren't paying, when they aren't hiring. How are people going to pay anything? Everyone has credit card debt. It is the most common thing Americans have. It's an insane amount of credit card debt. It is a level that we do not grasp and we will not see. President Sunday, hey, well, thank you for the raid, my friend. Thank you for the raid. And I appreciate all of you squiddies and people. Welcome to joining. I am running through why we are all completely fucked. And I'm actually having a conversation that is going to be about how we are ruined as a country, probably very soon. It'll be fun. Don't worry, it's global. Everyone's fucked. This doesn't just affect Americans. If you think that this thing happening here is not going to completely cascade to the rest of the world, you again don't understand how capitalism operates globally. So, we're in the most doomer part of this. Sorry you're late. It's going to be really, really, really awful. Mortgage default will spike to levels exceeding the 2008 financial crisis. You have to remember that was 10 to 15% of mortgages defaulting. I do not see the number being lower than that. I'm not sure how we can possibly talk about it being lower than that when you talk about 3 months of, again, 1/5 of all money disappearing from the consumer economy. Consumer spending includes rent and mortgages, by the way, when we talk about that statistic. So it's that too. It's all of these. Again, that's why they use the term consumer unit, which is the household. With that, insurance companies will also become insolvent. And private retirement savings will just simply be wiped out in the US. Trillions of dollars. Trillions of dollars wiped out. I don't foresee how. I do not see a way that the complete and total collapse of Social Security doesn't yield at least this. This is my hopeful side, and you'll see it peeking through every one of these stats. Less so here. If we hit a point where we are 3 to 12 months out and there is no end in sight for Social Security to begin its payments again, which is a possibility. That is not a silly thing to say. That is a possibility. We will have an absolute collapse of what we will call intergenerational households. They call it intergenerational consolidation is the term, where the older person who was in a nursing home or living on their own moves in with their parents, moves in with their kids, and their kids have their children move in with them. It's a consolidation of homes because people can't afford to keep up the homes. There's no money passing forward. We have to take care of grandma now too. Sorry, I can't help you with your mortgage or your monthly payments. This goes away. The weird part of this also is that, and it's, again, you have to think about this, the unintended consequences or the way that we've built our entire world around these programs. The state of Florida exists because of Social Security. It does. Like the idea that like retirement savings are enough for people there. People move there all the time. Social Security is paying for a huge amount. You're talking about like America's wang is going to get completely fucked. It's going to be brutal. But with this, you will have a really weird thing with a reverse migration from retirement communities to family support locations. Where their family lives, retirees will move back to, or will move to when they weren't there in the first place. Kids move away from their parents. Parents move away from their kids. This allows a disparate, multivariant economy to exist across the country or even the world. When that doesn't happen, when that collapses, it's really kind of a lot. It's kind of a lot. Sorry, I'm just thinking about like we are within 30 days of this being realistic. So just be aware we're that close. Emergency public housing will be a thing. People who are old sometimes don't have anyone left. If you haven't worked in a nursing home, there's an old Doug Stanhope line I love, that people who talk about life being sacred have never worked in a nursing home. And I agree with this statement because there is very few places in the world where you will see hopelessness in that way. People don't have family that will visit, or they simply, everyone else died, or they never had kids, which happens, and their partner died, or they never had one. And they're in this nursing home and they have dementia, they are sick, they have issues, they can't walk, they're cantankerous, they're racist, they're angry, they're fucked up, whatever it may be. There are 2 to 3 million seniors who have nowhere to go that will need emergency public housing. Do you know what America doesn't have? Is 2 to 3 million public houses. I figure that there will be ways that cities will deal with this at large. You will see, like we saw for under COVID, where you saw hotels taken over. I think there will be some of this, but we will see homeless elderly in the hundreds of thousands. I don't see how we get around that as a concept and as a thing. I don't foresee that. I don't think there's a way to get around that. It depresses me a great deal. When you're older, I'm 44. Ask me to sleep outside, and I still think it might be fun. But I also know, as I feel my body, that I'm 10 years, 20 years, 30 years away from that being a lot less fun and more terrifying. I'm going to get a fucking knapsack and go hiking. It's not the same when you're older. And when you're very old, it's very, very much not the same. It's terrifying. With COVID, we saw life expectancy decrease. We will see that happen again by wide numbers, 2 to 4 years, I figure, because of this. The labor market is going to be completely changed. It's going to be unrecognizable, I think, from where we're at today, because you are talking about not just reintroducing all of those people who now have to work. A big reason, by the way, we have Social Security was because people who were 90 years old were falling over dead working jobs that they shouldn't have had. And because they were hired less often, they were eating dog food to survive. The stories, we should at some point probably go back and read stories that really drove FDR and drove the New Deal and all of that, so people understand the reality of life then that will be the reality of life now. A 90-year-old person is not going to be driving for Uber, making shit wages, living in the car. They will die. And if they do work, it will just simply be in a completely fucked up way. Where am I getting the worst numbers for SSA job cuts from? We know that there are 7,000 job cuts currently in process that are happening. They've said, and Elon Musk has said, and Doge has said, that they're looking at a 30 to 40% cut in employment for these overstuffed administrations. Elon Musk has said this multiple times. I am just taking him at his word, because at this point, the way that the bills are passing through the Republican House, the budget for Medicaid, and with that Social Security, they share people, by the way. The $880 billion cut from Medicaid will gut all of these services flatly, and that will be the end. So all of my numbers are based on the Republicans getting their way in the next couple weeks, but also the number of interruptions we're already starting to see. This is the worst timeline, what you're seeing now. You missed already where I started, where it's like, hey, let's just say there's a 2-week delay. That's like, they cut 20, 30%. At minimum, it's going to be a 2-week delay, because this is how the system works there. This is what the Social Security Administration has said in the past would happen. There's a reason that they have the number of people. If you didn't know, right now, we have more people than ever on Social Security, but we're at the levels of 2015 in terms of employment, because we're actually hiring fewer and fewer people for an agency that literally is growing and growing. And we can, by the way, you can predict how many people are going on Social Security every year. It's very, very easy. We know people and we have tracked them, and we can say there are going to be this many people, but we're hiring fewer and fewer people. The stats are really depressing. So that's what I'm using Sure Shot as a thing. It's really, 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 really depressing. It's really depressing. I was at 3 to 12, right? Yeah. When you have a parent, these are assumptions. These are my assumptions. These are my assumptions. When you have a parent that you have to take care of in the home, and they have issues. My grandmother died of dementia. My grandfather died of lung cancer. Someone moves in to take care of them, if you can. And that means they don't work. Social Security's paid for people to do that before. That's not a thing anymore. So now you have people exiting the workforce to provide elder care, because it's their mom, it's their dad, it's their uncle, it's their brother, it's their sister, it's their child in some cases. They will fucking leave their job for their kid. Despite limitations, 2 to 3 million people will be able to enter the job force. That's not a good thing. For the economy, that's not a good thing. These are not high-skilled workers re-entering the job force. This is not Bill Gates re-entering to be a CEO. This is people who've been retired for 5 to 10 years, who left jobs that were kind of tough, and who haven't gained new skills in the last 5 to 10 years. These are not skilled workers. Capitalists love this. This is a bonus for them, but be ready to that. Is there a reason I'm being specific to the elderly? They're the majority of people on Social Security. I've included those on disability earlier, and I have them in here a little bit, but the vast majority of people on it are, and who will be affected by this in horrifying ways, are elderly. The stat goes that, it was on my other slide, 1 second. 40% of elderly who rely on Social Security for 90% of the income have an immediate crisis. So that stat, 40% of the elderly rely on Social Security for 90% of their income. It's worded funny, but that's the statistic. So you're talking about an incredibly huge group that gets completely fucked pretty much immediately. If that makes sense. As a thing. Thomas, any tips or tricks? I don't know. We're going to talk in a minute because all of this is doomer. We're going to talk about the theory behind it so we can actually make sense of it, because there is a way to make sense of this. I think it is just not easy. Release the deck later. Yeah, I wasn't looking forward to that because I don't like some of my formatting. But it'll be, I'll get it up in the QC after this. Speaking of, 1 sec, let me pop the, and you can join the QC. See, I have a button for that now. Button for that. Wages will drop. And we'll be grateful that there is a federal minimum wage of whatever the garbage shit it is. Waitering jobs will be great, I have a feeling, because the elderly won't work for that. But I don't know how restaurants will do. Again, the amount of money we'll go through the Social Security stats in a little bit. They publish them. This stuff's known. It's just horrifying. But as seniors enter the market, it will push younger people. I don't want to say normal people. It's terrible. It's terrible. Old people are normal. The gig economy will explode. Like TaskRabbit will make a fucking comeback probably. When people can't get those jobs at McDonald's or Burger King that are suddenly paying actually not terrible, not great, but not terrible wages. But when there's suddenly a huge influx of millions of people into the labor market, those wages will go down. When those wages go down, the gig economy flourishes because, again, capitalism. And that's why I think it's going to be a wage depression of 10 to 15% on the conservative side, for low skill positions, fast food, things like that. I do think it's a 10 to 50%, maybe more. I don't see it being less than that. Despite all this, there is no way that we do not get out of this without the federal government putting almost $1 trillion into an emergency appropriation to various things, which again is hilarious in that way that is only funny in the worst kind of situations. Like I was a student at Columbine. I've laughed at school shooting jokes because it's horrifying, but that's the way it goes. This is that thing. They will end up spending trillions of dollars to fix the problems they will create through not hiring 10,000 fucking people, 20,000 people. That's fucking crazy. State and local governments. The thing about Social Security is Social Security itself, Trump's proud to not tax. I am in Washington State. If you go across the border to Oregon, there's no sales tax. We have sales tax here. Sales tax on some things, not others. Food is exempt in a lot of ways. There's some really interesting things. Washington's pretty cool. Oregon does some cool stuff. But the vast majority of areas, sales taxes are a city thing. Sales taxes are a real thing, and they're actually how municipal services and civic services are funded. Do you like your potholes? I hope you like potholes, because you're going to have a lot of them. Do you like bridges? Hope you don't like bridges. Do you like street signs? Do you like graffiti being cleaned up? Do you like clean parks? All of that shit fucking goes. All that shit goes. Because when people do not spend money on Tide and groceries and bullshit, taxes aren't collected. And in the course of 3 to 12 months, you are talking about hundreds of billions of dollars in taxes that are not collected. And again, knock-on effects. As people aren't working, there isn't employee taxes. As people aren't spending because they're terrified, there's less taxes. It is not just Social Security that matters here. Social Security keeps other things afloat that enables other businesses. When those don't exist, we're not getting tax. This is the dominoes of capitalism. There is no way we don't have immediate creation of direct food distribution programs, the same that we saw in most parts of the world we never thought we'd have to look at here. You're talking about a huge number of people that are starving. You're going to feed them. Or they are going to be angry. The monetary expansion, if 2008 saw a huge injection of cash, which it did, that will look like child's play in comparison to what will happen. And again, look at these Mises fuckers and all these Randians who just are doing the thing that's going to force them to put a bunch of money into the economy and print a bunch of cash to save the banks and the fucking stock markets. But all of us get, our houses bought up by the banks and rented back to us at a premium. Fun. I talked to a couple people who are smarter than me. These are my guesses. I'm not putting it on them. These are my guesses. This is after we do not have Social Security anymore, which is a thing that, again, they're trying to do. There's people actively talking about this, and if Social Security collapses, there's no quick fixes. It's not like Twitter, and even with Twitter, there's not a lot of quick fixes. The GDP overall will contract by 7 to 10%. I'm not counting in the tariffs that will absolutely be destructive to this. Manufacturing will be destructive. You will see an insane, as soon as we do not buy all the dumb shit we buy when it comes in on boats, I don't know how that will, macroeconomically, the rest of the world will just start trailing. I don't foresee how else we get away from that. I really don't. Unemployment will reach Great Depression levels, 15 to 20%, Grapes of Wrath style. Enjoy that. I think we know what happens when people do not have this huge sum of money of redistribution. The reason we redistribute is good. Redistribution's good. I'm happy to argue that with anybody. It's fucking stupid to think otherwise. The federal debt will absolutely skyrocket. This does not solve it. Social Security does not impact the federal debt. Hilariously, it does not impact the federal debt in the way people are talking about. Absolutely not. Instead, this will increase it because you will see, one, fewer tax revenues overall. It'll be insane. So you won't have that. Fewer people in the workforce, further things produced, further things bought, further things traded, further things imported, all of that completely out the window. You will see deficits rise because that's where your revenue comes from, stupid. As all of these homes go up and it's all rentals and there's no one to buy because I can't afford to buy a house. 10 to 20% down is required to buy a house. Average house, $600,000 to $1 million, $600,000 to $1 million. I'm not in crazy areas. When I was in LA, I was renting a house and it was costing me a fortune. I was spending $4,500 a month to rent a house on a street where the guy 4 doors up was renting it for $11,000 a month. And it wasn't covering his landlord's mortgage. What the fuck? That's areas of this country that are just going to be completely decimated. Just completely fucked. It's insane. It's a lot. The short-term inflation will have deflationary spiral following it without a doubt. And it will become... Again, this is what the Great Depression was. This is what happens when consumer spending doesn't happen. We don't have redistribution. We have consolidated wealth. This is the thing. I'm just tracking what happened to us almost 100 years ago. Oh, weird. Oh, it's almost like to the year almost. We're getting really close. We're getting real close. It's going to be fun. 100 years. It's all it took to completely undo the shit we learned last time. Fun to think about it that way. Overall, our economy fundamentally is not recognizable in 2 years. I don't think it's recognizable. The life I have got now, which is not really recognizable to where I grew up, or the life that people had in the 80s and 90s, or the presumptions of what life would be, is it's similar, but it's not unrecognizable. I think unrecognizable is where we'll be in 2 to 3 years. I don't know what it means to retire at that point. And it's a thing that it's worth taking in for a second. Retirement is a newer concept to humanity. Prior to the 1900s, you died. Like, that's it. The idea of retirement is weird. And it kind of fucked with people for a long time, that you had this age of retirement that people would, start getting money from the government, pensions would take over. But that enabled people, that stability enabled people to take more chances. It enabled people to have businesses. It enabled my grandfather to work for a company that was at one point General Electric, Martin Marietta, which became Lockheed Martin. But he worked for a small subcontractor in Colorado that became a larger one, became another one. But that came out of a lot of small companies, came out of guys who went, well, I'm taken care of. I don't have to be stressed. I'm confident that this thing will be taken care of. We don't have that. Anyone who's looking at me who's my age or younger, or even older, really, you don't have that. We don't have any. What's retirement look like for us? Well, actually, that's an even better question when we don't even have Social Security. Because retirement for us kind of looks like, okay, we'll find a cheap condo somewhere that's nice. We'll move to fucking Arizona in a small town because it's warm, or Montana. We'll find some, whatever it is, best bet, because you're getting just shy of $4,000 a month for 2 people. There you go. Off you go. Maybe adjusted for inflation, you'll get a little bit more, but that's it. That's gone. So what does retirement mean anymore? Like, that's a real question. What does retirement mean? With stock market contracts like that, 401ks aren't a thing. These all go together. They all die together. Isn't that fun? They all die together. They all die together. So, as I say here, retirement as a thing will be completely rebuilt and reorganized. Without Social Security, which I don't even know how you restart after a year, let alone 2 or 3 with this leadership in this presidency. I have no idea what that even looks like. The entire healthcare industry will restructure. There is a chance here. Like, you want a silver lining? We will see full single-payer healthcare come about, because the healthcare system will not survive this. Like, it won't. So they'll need to be bailed out, and there's no way people will allow it to be just completely paid for and taken care of and then continue to charge insane premiums. You'll see single payer become a thing, or rage. Again, this is also not presuming that Mario's brother doesn't show up 9,000, 10,000 times. Elder care will become not institutionalized, but become family-based, more traditional in that setup. But again, because we don't have good jobs, it will be a very different beast as a thing. There will be a fundamental restructuring of what we have called the social contract. If society is not going to take care of us, and it takes care of us less and less every year, and it's been one of the reasons we are more alienated than we've ever been. Education doesn't take care of people. College is not taken care of. There's scholarships, but good luck with that. We don't have safety nets. We don't have police that are looking out for our best interests. We don't have doctors that are able to take care of us because of insurance. Government's not looking out for us. Tech isn't there for us. Everything has forgotten us. Why are we part of a society is a question people ask. And after this, it will be lot harder to talk about. And I don't think it'll exist in the same way. I think fundamentally our society will not even be recognizable at a philosophical level. And with that, instability politically will be a norm. It'll be a norm. It'll be completely fucked up in every single way. We will have to move, and I don't see how we get away from a universal basic income in some capacity and a best case scenario, or a privatized replacement system, which horrifies me to even consider. Horrifies me to even consider. This is the worst case scenario of a likely thing. Again, when we talk about Social Security, and let's just to jump back and take a second, let's talk about Social Security. What Social Security is, people don't often understand. It's a big, gigantic pile of money everyone pays into that accrues some level of minor interest that then pays out to people who need it, who are on the dole for it, who are part of the receivership programs of Social Security that we've agreed on and that people have passed laws to enable. Social Security is not on its way to bankruptcy, just so you know. It's not a thing. It's not, in the way that it's built now, going to go bankrupt in my lifetime. It will cut benefits minorly at one point or another if nothing is done. It's very easy to do some things. Very easy. Minor taxes would go a long way to fixing it entirely. Social Security keeps people out of poverty. That's what it does. 1 second. We are going to look at a thing. Social Security Administration has what is a damning leftist critique of industrialized capital. It's hard to say that it's not that, as far as I'm concerned. When we're going to read through it, I kind of like it as a thing because it's, as I was reading, I was like, this is actually kind of theory-ish in its own sort of odd way. One of the things in the 1800s that happened in America is a shift towards industrialization in cities. This is a big change from small town, small time, small farm living that people had in America. It's very much romanticized and not nearly as nice as we want to sort of talk about. It's not. But, to read. The life in all these many occupations differs in one way from that of the farms where once most Americans made their living. Today, we do not make a living. We buy it. We make money, and that money mostly determines the kind of houses we live in. The food we eat, the clothes we wear, the security and independence we took in hard times, sickness, and old age. Amazing. I actually really thought it was great. Even in the colonies, of course, some things were bought and sold. Paul Revere was a silversmith as well as a soldier, but the colonists used money chiefly to buy the luxuries of those old days, such as Paul Revere's porringers or fine furniture, tea, coffee, spices. Many Americans lived as did a New England farmer who wrote in his diary, "My farm gave me and my whole family a good living on the produce of it and left me, one year after another, $150. For I never spent more than $10 a year, which was for salt, nails, and the like. Nothing to eat, drink, or wear was bought, as my farm produced it all." This was America. Fantasyland almost, when you start thinking about it for a moment. It's completely fucked up. On the farms of our grandparents. Now this is not of our great-great-grandparents or great, depending for you, where soap and candles were made, hogs butchered for the smokehouse. A family still made a considerable part of their living without using money. Even today, an important part of the income of farm families comes in the things they raise and make for themselves. But farmers too now must have money. They need it for the kinds of things we no longer make at home, also for the modern tools for their trade, for machines and gas and oil to run them with, for commercial fertilizers and radios to follow weather and market reports. This is the actual Social Security Administration website. Just as a note, I'm just so you know, I'm not lying. I'm going to post it in here. I know it sounds like Marx, but that's just because Marx doesn't suck. Actually, I find it amazing as a thing that this exists on the real website. In towns and cities, money is the means of existence from day to day. The home of a pioneer family was a little world in itself. Members of the family were their own farm and factory workers, butchers, bakers, and barbers, policemen, firemen, often their own doctors and nurses, sometimes their own teachers as well. As one of these occupations after another has gone out from under a family's roof, it has become possible for us to have more goods and services than a family can produce for themselves. But most of a family's chance to have them depends on their ability to buy a living. It is common to hear young people discussing when they can afford to marry and have children. That question would have astonished young people on the frontier. A young man then could hardly afford not to marry. He needed a wife as a business partner, children as helpers. In early New England, not only spinsters but bachelors were under a cloud. Bachelors, in fact, were regarded with suspicion. Usually they had to live where the court told them to. Single people had to attach themselves to a family to get a chance to work for their living. Real things. Both the children and the old people earned their place at the family table. As we have shifted from a land economy to money economy, the work of the young and the old no longer has the same value in helping a family to make their living. Children need more schooling. Once they learned from their chores while doing the family's businesses many of the things they needed to know as adults, now the work at home fails to give them the background they need for jobs in business, trades, and professions. State by state, we agreed children must go to school. Change in the work done at home and in our knowledge and standards of childcare made children a luxury to a family instead of an economic asset. Families are smaller, especially in the cities. There are fewer sons and daughters to care for the old people of future years. Again, this Marxist, leftist, brilliant economic analysis is just the story of Social Security. And they have pictures for children. See the picture here? Cities have little room for useful work of young and old. It's accurate. The work of women shifted to offices, mills, and factories. So yes, pictures for those of you who don't like reading. Old people, like children, have lost much of their economic value to the household. Most American families no longer live in houses where one can build on a room or a wing to shelter aging parents and aunts and uncles and cousins. They no longer have gardens, sewing rooms, big kitchens where old people can help make a family's living. We don't even talk about living in this phrasing as it's using it. That's how it used to be. Well, you got to make a living meant making the things you need to live, which meant if I'm going to grow food and we're going to cook it, that's making our living. That's where the phrase comes from. It isn't salary. It's making our living. Making our living, quite literally. This is so fucking depressing to read. Old people were not dependent upon their relatives when there was a need in the household for work they could do. They've become dependent since their room and their board now cost money. Well, they have little to give in return. Now they need money of their own to keep the dignity and independence they had when their share in work was equivalent in money. The shift of work away from homes also explains the work of girls and women today. Women have always worked for a living. When work left the home, they followed it into factories and offices. By 1930, the census found a quarter of all the girls and women gainfully occupied, not including housewives working without pay for their families. Studies of employed women have shown again and again that they, like men, get jobs in order to support themselves and their families. In other words, they too have shifted from making a living to making money. It's among native-born white American women that the habit of wage work has gone up so rapidly. Married women, like single women, find it necessary to work for wages. Between 1900 and 1930, the percentage of married women at gainful work increased 6 times as rapidly as that of single women of the same age. Many married women carry the double job of housewife and wage earner. Here again, studies show they do it because their families need their money. Most of the work of wage-earning women represents not women's rights, but women's duties. During our lifetime, it has become increasingly difficult for a family to pull together and go into business for themselves in one way or another. For years, there was good land to the westward to be had for the taking. Homesteading was an outlet for the sturdy and ambitious. In towns, family shops and businesses were carried on with relatively small amounts of capital. There is no more free land on which a living can be made. A farmer needs machines as well as skill and grit if he is to compete in the market. In towns and cities, modern methods of production and merchandising have greatly increased the experience and capital needed to go into business and stay in business. Individual enterprise, which so often meant family enterprise, now plays a minor part in earning our national income. Including farmers, only about 1 in 5 gainfully employed working for himself. As a nation, we no longer work as individuals or families, but as employees. I did not think I would just really enjoy the writing on the Social Security Administration's website. Life is safer, but less secure. The safety of life has never increased as rapidly as any time on record in the past 40 years. Take Massachusetts, where there are records over a long period. A baby born in Massachusetts in 1789 had, on the average, an expectation of a life about 35 years. In the next century, the expectation of life at birth increased about 8 years. Babies born in Massachusetts in 1890 had before them a life expectation of 42.5 years for men, 44 for women. But between 1890 and 1930, those averages grew to more than 59 years for men and more than 62.5 for women. 2 seconds. This was written in 1934. This wonderful analysis that is far better than anything our government puts out now, just so you know, was written mid-1934. This is part of FDR's project. God damn, so depressing. Sorry, this is just, it just fucking horrifies me. This gain in average length of life has come almost wholly from success in saving the lives of babies, children, and young people. More of us live to reach middle age and old age. At the same time, the birth rate has been declining. The result of these changes is that old people form an increasing percentage of the population. While life becomes safer, the chance to earn a living has become less secure. The growth of employment in basic industries began to slow up. Machines and improved methods made it possible to increase output without increasing the number of workers needed to produce it. Then, for the first time, one important field of work after another reached its peak in employment and began to decline, using a smaller number of workers. Agriculture's share in the total employment of the nation had been going down since 1870, but each census up through 1910 counted a larger number of agricultural workers. In the census of 1920 and census of, I just want to talk about this stat here because it's one of the things, the half has never been told, story of American slavery and capitalism. There's this really amazing stat they mention here that agriculture's share in employment decreased after 1870. Now take a second and think what that means. The U.S. and the cotton industry and general indentured servitude slavery, chattel slavery, brutal institution of slavery that was destroyed in, the end of the 1860s, right before 1870. All of this work didn't go away. They still needed all of those people to do that work, but they didn't. In fact, those farms that used chattel slavery, that used brutal slave labor, began to close, began to go away, began to become poor, began to not produce. If someone ever tells you and lies to you that business people and capital produces jobs, ask them why this was the case then. Because if capital needed those jobs, why did they go away when they were free and suddenly had to be paid? When suddenly they couldn't brutalize people to make them work, instead they had to attract them, suddenly the jobs just weren't profitable anymore. Why is it that they couldn't just keep going? Because at the end of the day, that labor that was making cotton, because it was free, because they paid nothing, because their profit margins were so fucking large that it made the US the center of the cotton industry globally. The moment that margin shrank a little bit, it wasn't worth it anymore. Suddenly, having to actually pay a real wage meant that the US wasn't the center of the cotton industry anymore, and hasn't been for a very, very long time. That decline since 1870, and again, the increase up till then is very much about slave labor. That shift is because capital doesn't make jobs. It doesn't give a shit about jobs. It doesn't give a shit about jobs or production. It's a really great book to read. It's a really good book to read. It'll beat you up, though. It'll beat you up emotionally. To continue. In the census of 1920 and the census of 1930, the number of workers was smaller. In 1930, there were 600,000 fewer farmers and farm workers than there had been 20 years before. Similar change came in mining. My grandfather came from a mining town in West Virginia. Efficiency grew. In 1930, 2 soft coal miners could turn out as much as 3 had done 30 years earlier. The peak in the census record of mine workers came in 1920. In the 10 years that followed, industrial activity expanded and new mine workers were needed for gas wells and oil wells, but by 1930, the total number of miners had dropped by 100,000. All through the prosperous years of the 1920s, there were fewer workers on the payrolls of factories and steam railroads than there had been at the start of the decade. In 1930, the average number of factory workers was 1.5 million less than 1920. The average number of employees of steam railroads dropped by 500,000. A man no longer had the same chance to continue through his working years in the occupation he had learned as a boy. New openings in trades and service occupations and professions made it specialized demands which workers from older industries found it hard to meet. Does this ring a fucking bell? This was written in 1934. The conversation hasn't changed. It's almost 100 fucking years later. $100 fucking years later. And we're having the same discussion because this hasn't changed. Capital is doing the same shit. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. We're going to skip ahead. The word Social Security have become popular in the last 5 or 10 years. This is again written in 1934. Actually, the right and duty of a community to protect its members is as old as the records of men. Primitive tribes have rules and customs to assure safety for all. Go back and look. It's a real thing. Even pioneer American families relied on each other for help in trouble and emergencies. Barn raisings, corn huskings lasted down to our times, our survival of years when a household asked a neighbor's help in an emergency, knowing it would give its help when time came. The exchange of gifts mentality. But communities did not rely wholly upon the willingness of people to help each other. They did not rely wholly even on the willingness of families to support their own members. The common law of England, for example, lays down the duties husbands and wives owe to family support. Under later circumstances, we have found many of the older family laws oppressive, such as the laws which restricted the right of women to her earnings or her right to hold will property or to make decisions about children. Those laws, however, were intended for the protection of families under the circumstances in which they lived when the laws were made. They held a family together as an economic unit. The great English commentator Blackstone wrote, "Even the disabilities which the wife lies under are for the most part intended for her protection and benefit." It's great language. Fucking old-timers. As cities have grown, we've taken another series of steps for Social Security by banding together to pay for certain kinds of protection that no one family can provide for themselves. We have police, fire departments, for example. We make fire laws governing the kind of buildings people may build in safety to themselves and their neighbors. We're trying to get rid of that too. We support public health departments, trying to get rid of that too. We set up traffic regulations to protect safety of life on highways and streets. Oh my God. How awful is this? Just reading this, anyone else feeling, shit? This is just depressing. I'm just going to skip ahead until we get to this. The actual talk of this thing. Jesus. This is going through the entirety of the history of it. Let's do it. Our expression saving for a rainy day recalls the times when families stored wood in the shed and food in the cellar and pantry for seasons when it was difficult or impossible to fetch them. Why do they not store money in the bank now for times of unemployment or old age when it cannot be made? There is an answer to that question in a study made by the Brookings Institute, which analyzes the incomes and savings of families in our richest year, 1929. The Brookings Institute still. In that year, the study found families with incomes under $1,000 spent, on the average, more than they received. Nothing's changed. They drew on past savings or got outside help or went into debt. Those families with incomes of less than $1,000 represented a fifth of all the families in the nation in 1929. It's amazing how more things change, the more they stay the same. Families with incomes of $1,000 to $1,500 kept even on the average, but saved little, especially in cities where everything had to be bought and living costs were higher. These families represented another fifth of all families in that year. So that's 2/5 of families that are paycheck to paycheck or worse. That's better than now by a small amount. It's about $19,000. It's about 20 grand today, $1,000 ish, which is excessive poverty today. So think about that being the standard. The study found about 40% of our families saved very little as a group in our richest year for the hard times that were coming. Practically all the savings of that prosperous year were made by families at the top of the money ladder. Nothing changes. About 10% of us had family incomes over $4,600. It's about 80 grand now. Again, it's probably not even measurable in the same way. They were found to have made 86% of all the savings. Another 10% had incomes $3,100 to $4,600. They made 12% of the savings. The majority of American families, 80% who had incomes under $3,100, were found by that study to have saved only 2% of all that families saved that year. 80% of families, 2% of savings. Just, could the 80% have saved more than they did? They declared prices of family income, $2,000, may perhaps be regarded as sufficient to supply only basic necessities. An income of $2,500 was a very moderate one. The Social Security Act of 1935 grows out of these many changes in American life. It consolidates our past experience in meeting insecurity. It also sets up a bulwark against some of the newer kinds of insecurity that threaten large numbers of us in the 20th century. In 90 years, you'll hear them talk about this. In 90 years, Social Security hasn't missed a payment. The Social Security Act of 1935. See, it's one of those things, the way that people phrase things conditions how we talk about it. When people say in 90 years it hasn't missed a payment, the implication there is that 90 years ago it missed a payment. When you would say Social Security has never missed a payment, more accurate, doesn't have the other implication. It's odd how language teaches us and works with us. The Act authorizes federal grants and aid to help states to give service for the health of mothers and children and strengthen and extend public health services. It authorizes funds for the study of national and interstate health problems. These parts of the Act promote security by preventing sickness and giving children, especially country children, a fair start in life. Finally, two provisions deal with insecurity and earning. They apply to groups of our people who have moved into occupations where earning often is risky. They cover a great share of the wage earners who are wholly dependent on their ability to buy a living. Under one provision, Social Security Act sets up a framework to protect the states which wish to enact laws for unemployment compensation. Yeah, that's part of this. Federal funds are authorized to help a state to do this by meeting the cost of administration. Social Security Act does not say that any state must have one. It does not say what kind of law a state should have. It does not say that a business in a state which has unemployment compensation shall not be penalized in competition with a business state that does not. The possibility of harmony in state action became clear during the discussion of the Social Security Act in Congress, and up to April 1st, 1937, 42 states in the District of Columbia had enacted unemployment compensation laws. I wonder which states didn't. I wonder if they're the Bamas and the Mississippis. These laws are beginning and making the costs of industry's fluctuations charge upon industry rather than only on jobless workers. This is the setup for all of it. This is the setup for all of this. We have to, and yes, I'm going to start using it. People have to buy a living. They can't make one anymore. They have to buy a living. That's how we live. We live in a place where people have to buy a living. So when we talk about what it means for people on Social Security, it's because we have created an economy over the course of the last 140 years in which making a living is not possible. It's not. They have to buy a living. This is why you have a whole bunch of people who run startups or who are famous or billionaires, all of which got their head start in ways that they don't like to talk about, right? Bill Gates, a college dropout whose first company he built this, he just built his first company's first contract was with IBM, building the system he would later steal to make Windows and would lose in a lawsuit, but would end up winning in its own way. How did he get that contract with IBM? His mother was on the board of directors of IBM, you say? I wonder how he was able to make his living. Interesting. Probably not related to his family in any capacity. Others of us, my grandfather moved away from West Virginia to get an engineering job in Colorado, wanting to leave the poverty of coal mining behind because his family was poor coal miners. So his dad had died when he was just an infant, killed in a mining accident, my great-grandfather. And when he came to Colorado, he found a way to do that. And he could buy a living in a nice home for his 3 daughters, my mom and her sisters, and his wife, and they had a comfortable, nice life. He did. He was able to buy that. But as he paid into that, and as he was then taking care of his everything, his pension, his retirement, all these things didn't really presume the cost that would be showing up. Social Security made ends meet. That's how it works. It helps. It helps everybody because they pay into it and they get to have that savings come back to them. So let's talk about the system as it is and why we're in this weird place. Let's touch on a couple of weird theory things, which will be fun. I think it'll be fun. Let's talk just real quick because I want to go over numbers just while we're here, because I have people who I know are going to be, hey, where'd you get some of those? Let's talk about consumer spending. Consumer expenditures is really fascinating as a thing. Let's talk about 2023. That's what we're going to kind of dive to. So this is the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, which is a government org that just releases really raw numbers kind of across the board. They're about what people are spending on and about consumer spending. The important stuff in here, let's talk through it lightly. I'm actually going to make this a little bit bigger. We're going to cover my face for just a moment because we can. Oh no, that's terrible, Brooks. Why did we do that? There we go, down to boop, boop, boop. And we go, whoop. All right. There. We'll zoom in a little bit to make it a little bit easier for everyone. It doesn't wrap well. This is not a site that has, hundreds of people in UX and design. The things that matter. 2023, the annual expenditure for all consumer units. Consumer units are households. Remember this. Consumer units are households. If you remember me going over the definition of this, a single person living alone, consumer unit, a family, a consumer unit, a child at 30 who moves back in with his parents, consumer unit, household, consumer unit. That grouping, oh, good fucking Christ. Joshua, you're buying a Brooks. Well, thank you very much for the fit. Insanely. Yeah, Brooks stocks are going up. They're trying. They're fucking trying. It's deeply appreciated, Showa. And if you have a request or anything, feel free to start making demands. I am nothing if not apparently a whore for money in some capacity. Consumer units spent $77,280. This is an increase, a small amount. This is a household spending. Overall. Now, what do they spend it on? Well, let's talk about spending patterns, okay? Because there's 14 components to spending patterns as they talk about it. I'm just here to watch a trash fire. I don't think anyone else got the quote. It's Snake Plissken. The more things change, the more they stay the same. It's a welcome to the human race ending. Great moment. Escape from LA. Shittier than Escape from New York, but it also has that great moment where they talk about LA being on fire from the Santa Anas and the winds, which I couldn't help but think the whole time LA was on fire. Phenomenally fun, stupid movie. He surfs into Steve Buscemi's car. The fuck else do you want from a movie? I don't think. Housing expenditures is 33% of the total expenditures of a consumer unit. So again, let's think about how much money that is. It's a third of paychecks, a third of spent across the boards, a third. This is up 4.7% after 7.4% increase in 2022. Again, post-COVID, as always, that shot back up. Transportation expenditures is 17%. This is why and again, this is not necessarily public transport, mostly not public transport. This is cars, car insurance, and gas. That thing. Anything car related. I think this includes tire purchases, repairs, shit like that. Transportation expenditures is grouped in there. Food spending is 13%. Personal insurance and pension spending. This is insane that it's this high. It's 13% of expenditures. That's about right for me and our family. And Washington's very good about this stuff as far as like kids and insurance goes, but it's fucking crazy. Spending on cash contributions. Cash contributions comprise cash contributed to persons or organizations outside the consumer unit. Alimony, child support payments. 3%. It's that large. Again, 3%. Care of students away from home. Mom sending you $100 as a birthday gift, as an example. These kinds of things. 3% of total expenditures is the setup on average. Education's 2%. And miscellaneous is 1.5. So this is an insane grouping of these things. And when we start talking about, again, just to go back to that first, that slide here. Sorry, this slide here. $1.4 trillion is distributed annually. The monthly payments are $117 billion. If we just break it out, every week it's $27 billion that is dispersed and consumed immediately at those ratios I just talked about. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? It's an important statistic as we talk about it, because if we have 27 billion, let's just say 30 because math's easier, 30 billion in weekly payments as that goes off, round down, I don't even give a shit. It doesn't even matter. This is like a silly large number. And a third is straight up for rent. That is $10 million. There's $9 billion that isn't made in rent payments. 9 billion in rent. But let's talk about how much that actually is in the entirety of the thing. So, average income before taxes for a household unit, again. So that's two people making 50 grand a year. This is on average. And again, average, not median, average. So there's some outliers that completely fuck with this. It's $100 million, $100,000, $100 million. Sorry, the numbers. One of the great tricks capital plays on us is it makes us think that wage money is the same as industrial capital because we measure them the same. When I say that, I have $100,000 I make a year, that's my living wage that I make, right? Yeah. My wife and I make, We don't make that. We're not quite as good as that. But let's say I make 100 grand a year. When we say that's what I make, but Elon Musk makes $100 billion or $500 billion in a year, those numbers aren't the same. They're not just larger, but they don't operate the same or work the same. They work at a different magnitude functionally in every single way. When we talk about these numbers, it's important to remember that. So, these numbers are not in thousands right here. And they say when they are not. So these numbers are just pretty raw. Food that's spent is this amount. This setup is about 10 grand. Food at home is food with 6 at home, 4,000 a year spent away. McDonald's, restaurants, coffee, Starbucks, things like that. But of the 100,000, there's that quarter that's straight up for housing. Now, housing is broken down into a handful of very particular things. Owned dwellings tended to be a slightly higher chunk. Renting tends to be a slightly lower chunk, with other bits of lodging and things that go in there. This is the setup. This is where people break down. This is the breakdown of the average incomes. It's kind of amazing to sort of make their way through. So when we talk about these setups and how people are distributing and how they're set up, this is where I got a lot of my numbers from. I will just share there. Just so you can look through Bureau of Labor Statistics as a thing. Social Security Administration has its own numbers. I already put that link in there. Read the story. It's kind of incredible. But all of this, how can we talk about this? Because the way that this is happening, there's a really strange misunderstanding about the function of what Social Security is. Social Security is not about spending money. This is one of the reasons we end up having a very difficult time talking about it from a critical theory, leftist, anarchist, non-governmental, anti-governmental, anti-state position, because it isn't itself a good thing. There are a huge number of people who are going to die when we don't have it very quickly. 1 second. Violet's crawling on you. Do you want to sit in here and read them, buddy? Yeah. Okay. Bye, Violet. You want to come say hi? 1 sec. I've got 2 little monkeys. Oh no, there's very little you can do. It's fine. The stream doesn't mind. The Dexter's yells entertain people, I think. Is she stealing your book? She said, "This is just going to be a moment. Just going to be a moment." Hey, Dex. Love you guys. It's my wife comes in and she just looks at me. She goes, "What the fuck am I gonna do?" Like, it's just like, it's what am I gonna fucking do? I got little monkeys. There's very little you can do. You fear for their future? Try being their dad. There's a line in SLC Punk. Kids, not much hope for them. It's going to be an interesting world. It's going to be an interesting world. Best you can do is prepare them as best as you can and hope they're able to find some level of happiness and survive. It's a whole thing. It's a lot. When you start talking about like, we homeschool. We don't homeschool for religious reasons, as you may guess. I have issues going to schools. It's part of my PTSD. There's a mix with that. It's also that Dexter very early began to read because we read to him all the time. It's the lesson of having kids that I've learned is that just having people in your life who are interacting with you pushes you ahead of other people because most people don't have the ability or the time to do that. I've been fortunate because I work from home. I do tech stuff that my wife and I are able to be home most of the day while they were very little and growing up. Dexter started reading way ahead of the curve, and we kind of kept pushing that. And when we started seeing where he'd be when he went into school, we had to make a decision. It was like, do we do that, and how will they handle it? And we started seeing how other kids were. So you do what you can, and fuck, there's no right answers. There's no right answers. You're old and gay as fuck, but that's just me. I mean, I'm fucking whatever the fuck I am. I'm old, and people have been calling me gay Rasputin or gay Sam Hyde lately, which is a whole thing. Fair, probably, as far as like visually. I'm not able to disagree with that. But it's tough. It's tough to look at the kids. It's a very difficult time. Very difficult time. But I promised that we would do theory, and I was not lying. I know, Sam Hyde, yikes. I know. It is what it is. If you haven't looked underneath the Philosophy Tube videos, I am apparently a huge transphobe as well, who hates trans women. Sunday too, apparently. Apparently someone said that I didn't understand Nietzsche, or that I didn't. My favorite, I think, is the dozens upon dozens of people commenting saying, at the end of it, she makes fun of the idea of asking if Nietzsche is woke. Don't you understand the video? And I kind of like that, because they're basically like, why would you expect her to be doing philosophy? She's being clever. Nothing like being clever. Fucking love clever people. Useless bunch of fucks. But what the fuck is Social Security? Just to mention, I'm not anti-trans at all in any capacity. Like, it's one of those identity politics things where, oh, you're criticizing someone who's trans, you must hate trans people. That kind of shit. Like, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm criticizing people who suck at Nietzsche and lie to their viewers, knowingly lie and misrepresent things to their viewers. I find it to be a despicable quality of a human. You don't have to talk about things. Here's a life lesson, if I can pass it on. If you don't know something, you don't have to talk about it. Okay? I know it sounds weird in today's modern age, where people express everything all the time and have opinions on the slightest little thing in the world. But if you don't know something, you're allowed to not know something. That's cool. And in fact, not knowing stuff is interesting. I know stuff that you don't know. You know stuff I don't know. It allows us to have a conversation. But if you know everything, and you claim to know everything, and you talk about everything, you don't have to do that. You don't have to, like, tell me. Because I don't care. If you think you know everything, you are the last person I want to fucking talk to. You're the last person I want to talk to. Like, that's it. I need to talk to people who don't know. Someone asked in the QC, I'm always afraid of asking stupid questions. What do I do? And it's like, you need to first understand that there is no such thing as a stupid question. And I mean that. Anyone who says there is a stupid question, or that's a stupid question, is an asshole piece of shit. Tell them to fuck themselves and move on to someone else. Because anyone who actually knows things, if I were to go to a physicist and go, hey, like, I don't get, like, space-time. Is it like space and time, or like a ball? They're not going to go, dumbass. They're going to go, actually, it's far more interesting. Because they like what they do for a living and they want to talk about it. Because people who care about things like to talk about the thing they care about. And if you show even the slightest interest that is genuine, they will answer. Why? One, because they fucking can't help it, because people don't ask questions often, especially simple questions that give them a chance to really flex their muscles. Because if someone comes to me and they go, hey, Brooks, what's a body without organs? I don't get that shit. I light up. And it's not because I'm smarter than you. I light up because that's a muscle I get to flex, the same way that someone who's a fucking gymnast, if you go, hey, I heard you can jump and, like, in place, they'll do it for you. They'll do it for you all fucking day. My fucking kid will do it all for you all fucking day, because it's exciting to be able to do a thing and to practice and to do it and to have someone with you and to have responses. And here I am with, what's the body with organ? Well, I'll tell you. And I have to flex the muscles of knowledge to work it out. And that thing I have to do makes me better at what I do and makes me smarter, because I have to explain to you. And if you don't understand, if I'm incapable of explaining to you, I learn that, and I learn where my shortcomings of my own understanding are. This is how anyone who actually has knowledge operates. Period. So it says very few lawyers like to talk about law. That's bullshit. That's bullshit. I know. I have a huge number of my former CBO, my company that I had. He was a wonderful guy who I got to know because he was a lawyer at Lucasfilm. He was in the business affairs department, and he did law shit all day. Our number one discussion in our off time for the entirety of our relationship has always been weird lawyerly shit, because I like talking about it. He likes talking about it, and we find weird places to cross over. Lawyers love talking about law. They love discussing interesting legal shit or explaining stuff, as long as it's not like the way that like you use a doctor. Hey, what's this rash look like? Make an appointment, fucker. I bill by the hour. That's different than, hey, so I have a question about the nature of copyright. Ugh. Everyone and their fucking mother who went to fucking goddamn law school wishes they could have written a dissertation on copyright. They would love to talk about that shit. They will talk about it forever. Everyone who knows something wants to talk about it. Go to a Minecraft community. Go to the Undertale subreddit. Go anywhere and ask a question to someone who really knows a lot about that stupid bullshit. Pablo Hidalgo. He's the story guy. He's the guy who wrote Star Wars Encyclopedia. He knows everything about Star Wars, also Transformers and G.I. Joe. Plus other things, but those are like the ones I'm certain he is like an expert in. And if you go, so I'm wondering, and I mean, be genuine. Don't be a fucking asshole. That's part of this. Hey, Pablo, so what is the story of the Rancors and Force Witches? And he will blah, because it's fucking interesting to him. He and Leland will talk for hours, because people who really care about their shit nerd out being asked questions that are genuine. Period. Period. Does he know why G.I. Joe Renegades was canceled? No, he will know in-universe shit and probably stuff he can't talk about under NDA. But this thing people have, they want to talk about stuff. If you don't know stuff, don't be one of those people, because people who don't know things trust people who have confidence. And when Philosophy Tube or Plastic Pills or Jordan Peterson, who I put all in the same fucking bucket, they act like they know their shit and they have confidence. People who are seeing that come out the other side and they go, wow, that person must know what they're talking about. And that assumption fucks everybody. That assumption fucks everybody. There's no way around it. Assumption fucks everyone. Speaking of theory, though, let's talk about social production. Because one of the things about the world we live in and the place that gave us Social Security, the space that gave us that, the social world that produced Social Security as it is, that setup. This didn't develop out of nowhere. This isn't some idea someone had. This came out of the material conditions and reality of the lived lives that people had, their experience, and how that experience fell back on, how that experience changed, how they viewed experience itself. This thing, this shift, this is social production. I'm going to take us through a little bit of my boy, Eugene Holland, who writes excellent work in general, but his guide on anti-oedipus, which is, if you don't know, you join us every single Tuesday. This upcoming reading on Tuesday may be slightly late, but every Tuesday at noon-ish Pacific time, I sit and I read through anti-oedipus, Deleuze and Guattari's big fucking magnum opus, the beginning of the Capitalism and Schizophrenia series. We do word by word, paragraph by paragraph, sentence by sentence explanations of the entire book. Holland has been one of my guides. I also a lovely person in real life, it turns out. But his book absolutely gets at some of the heart of things inside of this stuff. And one of the things that's really important when we talk about the social world, we talk about anything that's happening inside of production, we need to not have simplified views of how capitalism operates. The very simplified view, people who have not actually read Marx and tend to be on the pseudo left, they shit on people who have money. They shit on people who make money, people who are rich. They don't understand the nature of the flux of capital. They don't talk about how capital actually represses. They presume that the money is what enables it, not the money that does it or that determines it. And by assuming that money is what enables others to oppress others and gives people their power, that it starts there, it puts them in a position of just wanting money themselves. Because really, that's what they want. They just want more women drone pilots. They just want more trans police officers or philosophy people because they see themselves in that, or it is them. And they see that they can take advantage of this identity towards this end. But as DNG show us in Anti-Oedipus, this is not a matter of understanding only production on the capitalist side. It's not only understanding production internally. It's about understanding the forces with which we find ourselves at the whims of. These forces, they're also the forces socially. In Anti-Oedipus, the way that we start talking about desire, desiring production, desiring machines, social production, social machines, it is not two separate systems. It is not that we have our internal psyche that we act out and then external to us we see the interactions of that. No, it is our internal system is the external system and vice versa. They happen at once. It is just a question of magnitude. When I was talking about capital earlier, this is what they are getting at in Anti-Oedipus. This is what Marx gets at in Capital. The nature of these things is not as simple as saying this is amount X and this is amount Y. No, the differential is different. The nature of how they operate is different. The way that they concentrate is different. So when we talk about the regimes as they use it, or as I will talk about it here, as we talk about the orders of magnitude of desire, we have on the one hand desiring production. You can think of it as molecular. They use that term quite often. Then they talk about the molar, the at-large, the aggregate. They use this term very specifically. This is the world of the molecular and the mole. If you don't know what a mole is a bunch of molecules. It's a fucking bunch of molecules. It's actually very specifically the amount of molecules that are necessary for each molecule within it in order to have a gram's worth. It's a confusing sort of thing that is very complicated. But at the basis, it's a bunch of it to enable large-scale reactions versus a single molecule of the thing. And like that, desiring production is desire, connecting desiring production. And in mass, at large in society, it is just the order of magnitude of all of the desires, all the desiring production and everything that's happening. Just as desiring production is organized on the BWO, social production is organized on what Deleuze and Guattari call the sociist, the earth, the despot, or capital. It is not only the socius as the social focal point of investment of productive desire that varies historically. So does the very nature of the relationship between desiring production and social production. As we go through time, you just heard us talk about it, for God's sake, reading the Social Security website from 1934. As we change through time, as the order of production shifts, it is not just that the order of production shifts, it is the nature of desiring production and social production that shifts with it. In savagery, in the prehistorical, in the times of tribal interactions, that space, desire, is bound so tightly to the social world, the socius, that the organization of social production almost completely determines the organization of desiring production. You find desire in these spaces consumed effectively immediately. When someone is hunting in one of these tribes, they are interacting immediately. They find their social position immediately consumed, connected back to desire. Even how they are dealing with things socially. There is not some grand narrative or story or lore or capital or images. They are dealing contextually with meat there, stuff here, things here. They don't have the written word. They don't have the spoken word in the same way we do. They have the voice, they have graphism, but it isn't the same marriage of the two. Their interactions, desire and social production, are tightly bound. Only under capitalism, partly because of the segregation of reproduction from production at large, does the organization of desiring production become significantly different from the organization of social production on the socius. This, thus allowing the body without organs to emerge from more or less complete determination by social production. Capital's funny this way, because in capital we find social production being determined. That's not a large sort of story at all. It's actually hyper-quantified little digits, hyper-quantified little bits as people are going about their day. They get money here, they can make profit here, they can do this here, they can sell this there. All of these things, all of this value that is abstracted into capital. This is where we find our meaning. And through this, the space of desiring production and social production actually has a mediation, has a shift in how it sort of works. It allows it to be determined differently. This is why Deleuze and Guattari say the body without organs appears only at the end of history. Until capitalism, the BWO is too powerfully overdetermined, too powerfully written over. The body without organs is the space of possibility, the surface on which potentials are written and recorded, the surface on which you decide or believe you're deciding what you're going to be capable of, or what you are capable of, or what is even possible. The realm of all of that is written on the surface of experience that the BWO gives you. This thing is so determined by the king or the earth that you never actually see it emerge until capitalism, where we have a grand difference in how desire and the social order work. How this happens is a big deal, and you'll see why this connects back in. This is anti-production. Anti-production plays a central role in organizing social production on the socius, just as it does with desiring production on the BWO. Indeed, like the term desiring machines, the concept of anti-production provides a crucial link between the realms of desiring production and social production. As we saw, anti-production designates what psychoanalysts before have called primal repression. This is the advent of a process of recording in the human psyche involving repetition, memory, representation, the formation of the unconscious, this primal repression. This is the space inside of us where we find that first bit through the repeated acts of what we are doing and the repeated stimulus response of the world with us. It does not annihilate production. Oh no. Oh no. Anti-production is different. Anti-production is very different. Anti-production, to continue, the advent of a process of recording the human psyche involving repetition, memory, representation, formation, and conscious. In the realm of desiring production, considered in and of itself, i.e. abstractly, the recording process itself is ambivalent. The forces of anti-production free desiring production from strict instinctual determinism by suspending organ-machine connections, just distractions effectively. We can now add this. It can also make it susceptible to capture in systems of representation. Anti-production is a very unique place that we find structures being played with. Anti-production is more or less not the break of production or the working against production. Production is the things within us, the thing within desire, the thing within society. Production is the connective element that produces, that builds, the fervor of life, you could say, is production. Anti-production is the breakage of that, the shattering of that, the sameness, the pushback in this way. Anti-production is the maintenance of the system instead of the ongoing new sets of production. It is repetition instead of new. We'll get through this. Don't worry. There's a lot here. There's a lot here. It's not annihilation either. We're not going Nick Land's direction. We're going to Klosowski's direction, Lyotard's direction, ultimately, as it turns out. It is consideration of the relations of social production and anti-production that enables us to evaluate the results of the recording process, inasmuch as these relations generate the systems of representation that capture and tie desire to the socius in the institution of social organization. This is, I fucking love Holland because he synthesizes things to such a nice, clear point. The relationship of social production, the way that things in social meaning is produced, and anti-production, this interaction lets us evaluate the recording process itself. Is recording working? Is the process of recording, how I'm remembering it, is it effective? Is it generating the systems of representation that capture and tie desire to the socius itself within capital? For such systems can either contravene or confirm the dynamics of desiring production. It is one of the distinctive traits of the capitalist mode of anti-production and social production that it raises the ambivalence of the recording process to a maximum, sponsoring both the decoding and recoding. To talk about capital for a second, this is core Marx, and it's kind of a little bit through Deleuze and things like that. When we talk about the codes of social, I have a fucking 40-minute video, by the way, that goes on over that. Actually, it probably is worth sort of linking real quick. Give me 2 seconds to pop it up. It's stuff I much prefer, and I'm pretty happy with it. I'm actually very happy with how it popped in and how it turned out. This is what are social codes, my video that goes over sort of the history through Strauss, Godelier, Griol as well, obviously through Deleuze and Guattari, and how social codes change within capital. Social codes are sort of overdetermined repetition that we find ways to have power dynamics in smaller societies without writing. So a small tribe may, for example, go hunt. They may find deer. They may find buffalo. How do they determine who does what? Who hunts, who cleans, who cooks, who takes care of what? It's not as simple as what we exist under. Instead, it's actually over time, they find things that work, and there's odd sort of dynamics that sort of keep these things contextual, but that setup is social coding. When a king comes along and overwrites all of that, we call it overcoding. But when capital comes along, capital takes those codes and it kind of breaks them down. Like, what is a blacksmith? A blacksmith is like 900 different jobs. That's not what a social code is. A social code for a blacksmith is a blacksmith. But now it's, well, which part of blacksmithing? What kind of thing you're going to do? Or because capitalism and capital break all of these things down. And it breaks it down to really these parts that we can find efficiencies in or that capital can take advantage of. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. The idea of being born into a trade because your father did that trade, or because you're born into a caste system or a station in life, this is coding and overcoding at play. Capital doesn't do that in the same way. And you can see that today when we talk about class struggles. You're free to tell me where the line between the bourgeois and the proletariat exists in a service society like America. Kind of not really a fucking thing in the same way. Proletariat in the Industrial Revolution, we can talk about. Lumpen proletariat, fuck you for even talking about that. And bourgeois is what? How does that work? How does that work? I know people who are on a disability who spend all their day playing World of Warcraft. Are they bourgeois? I would be very hard pressed to put them in the same group as, like, classes, caste, codes, social meanings, all these things. Capital just jumps on and tears all the way apart and takes it apart and shoves it around. But it doesn't destroy them. That's not really the thing. It uses them. It uses those archaisms. And it does so by transferring it into something else. I'm not going to use the word for it for right now because it's its own complex thing. But those codes are decoded and then as he talks about it, there's a recoding that happens where it's rebuilt into the way the social sort of formation sets up. This thing that happens, this is the recording process being taken to its maximum. Anti-production, which is the maintenance of memory and the repetition of that thing, with social production. These two elements and how they distinctively work together raise the ambivalence of the recording process to a maximum, sponsoring both decoding and recoding. This social sense of anti-production is derived in large part, we're going to do a deep dive on theory here. I hope you guys are up for it. Is derived in large part to Bataille's notion of dépenser, the dispense, or the expenditure, which is normally how it's expenditure. Actually, expenditure already possesses in Bataille himself both psychological and anthropological dimensions, but it is primarily the latter that concerns us here, for it provides a devastating Nietzschean critique of the bourgeois political economy and utilitarian philosophy that crucially supplements that of Marx within the schizoanalytic perspective. Bataille's insights are so important that had he not existed, schizoanalysis would have had to invent them. I think Klosowski is being left out here. I have a whole rant I'm going to make in a second. Schizoanalysis would have to invent them. No society, Bataille insists, really organizes itself around needs and production of use values to meet needs, as necessary as such production may be to all forms of social life. We are working together because we all need food. We all need shelter. This is a very common Calvinist Christian conservative view of the history of the world, that, oh, we're working together because we need to. The social contract mentality. We support each other because we need to support each other. We're here for each other. We're here to supply needs. Bataille goes, yeah, no, actually not at all. Social organization is always based on the expenditure of excess. Productive activity derives its meaning and purpose from such expenditure, not the other way around. We're going to have another thought on this that plays with this in the same way. To say that again, the expenditure of excess, every economic system, and in Bataille's work, there's kind of two types of economies. Let's talk about there's the large grand economy, and then there's the closed economy. Generally, economists that we're talking about, when we talk about economics, they're talking about a closed economy. They're talking about money moving around. But that's a weird way to look at things. It is basically taking out a single piece of abstraction and being like, hey, look, I've been looking at the geometry of a coral reef and it's really geometric. It's like, yeah, but that's not helping anything. This coral reef's got a lot of other shit going on. Just like with an economy, the abstraction of capital itself, as we're playing with it, it's only valuing and talking about a thing that only does that exchange thing. It's kind of a weird tautology we've created for ourselves. So Bataille goes, it's actually about excess. Think about the entirety of the US and all of the extra shit that we produce. This is not just about shit and piss. This is not just that. This is excess energy, excess weapons, excess capital, excess people, excess everything. Think of the economy at large, the grand economy of the earth. The sun produces an exceptional amount of energy that is being spent and then expelled back out into the world from the earth. It's powering us, and there's an excess that's always left over. At that level of the economic system, we have an excess that is extraordinary. And if we don't manage that excess, it will consume us. He's playing in a very particular way. He's playing in a very particular way with the idea of how societies have existed. If you read, for example, Pierre Clastres, who wrote Society Against the State. Society Against the State is, Jesus Christ, what a good fucking book. I cannot recommend it more just in general. Pierre Clastres did a background study on the guattari, which I feel like is now like a fucking milkshake. Why do I fucking feel like that's part of the health movement now, the guattari tribe? That's going to bother me now that that's in my brain. Because it is. That's because it is. Because it is. So he studied the guattari. He studied these tribes, and he noticed it isn't so much that like the tribes happened upon having a state or happened upon a leader that just took over, and it just inevitably was coming. He noticed that these tribes actively did shit to stop it. That they stopped, they had processes to stop centralized concentrated power. The guattari, here, let me switch over to the Webby shit, and let's, because this is actually worthwhile to take a second so you can see the, guy, and I know I'm in a guattari, tribe. I guess the Achi. I'm never going to get that right. This might not be them, actually. Oh, no, it is. In the past, they've been called the Guayaquil. 17th century until their peak fell outside context. In the 20th century, the Achi were described as a nomadic hunter-gatherer living in small bands, depending entirely on wild forest resources for subsistence. In the 20th century, 4 different ethnologistic populations of Achi were contacted and pacified. Northern Achi, the other Achi, another Achi, and another Achi. And I'm probably not even pronouncing that correctly, and that's the way that works. Each of these populations was an endogenous dialectical group consisting of multiple residential bands with no peaceful interaction between the groups. This is important. Come on, where are you? How do you not have... There it is. Really, Classrus does not get his own section? That seems like a loss. Classrus Society Against the State, to go back to the PDF, visited them, and his ethnological study on them spent a ton of time talking through how they actually actively worked against centralized power. So one tribe, I don't know if it was the Guattari, they had to deal with, they had chiefs. All these tribes have chiefs. They had a hierarchy of sorts. We wouldn't call it that, though, not as we know it today. But they had chiefs in a way. And the way that the chiefs were dealt with had open mockery as one of the ways that they sort of had to sort of deal with things. People would make fun of them, like in their tribe, openly making comments, making fun of them, and mocking them, especially when they became a little bit too big for their britches, with hubris, with power, drunk with power in a way. People would literally mock them and shit on them in front of everyone. And this pushed them into a position of weakness socially. This wasn't an accident, as Classrus would go on to sort of show. Chiefs were also required to give gifts, but not just kind of giving some gifts. They were required to give asymmetrical gifts. So like, I give you a bottle of wine because I come over for dinner. I bring a bottle of wine. Next time you come over, you bring me a bottle of wine. Symmetrical gift. If I was a chief in the same interaction, I come over and I bring you, I don't know, a car. You bring me a bottle of wine. Like, asymmetrical fucked up, because the chief tended to have power. He tended to have shit. And it was important to have him not keep power. And so he had to give stuff away continuously, because power and things were not allowed to coexist in the same person. And the chief had power, and so as such, it was like his social role was giving shit away as a thing. He talks about, Classrus talks about how they had full resources dispersal. But that last bit where I mentioned how there are the 4 tribes who were constantly at war, we view war as destructive. These tribes did not. The Guattari is the tribe he talks about, and I find it most fascinating because these tribes were at war with each other. Violent war. We see this as, oh God, death and sadness. They saw it as actually keeping things in balance. There's a social fragmentation that happens when a tribe is so large that you find disagreements beyond, say, a couple hundred people. You find disagreements that are not reconcilable through talking, or through discussion, or through having a chief give an edict, lots of different ways. And when that happens, Tribe will break off and fucking declare war. And then they are literally at war. It's not a peaceful, extensive conversation. It's out. These things actively were happening in tribes. And Clausewitz saw this there, but you can follow this through a huge number of tribes that resisted general state creation. They actively had things they did that stopped concentration of wealth from forming. This was the way states were formed, like as a thing. I find this eternally fascinating. So when we're talking about excess, that's what we're talking about. Because if wealth becomes concentrated, if wealth becomes a thing that a society has, wealth and expenditure and all of this, maybe Clausewitz was right. Maybe it's not meant to be kept and held on to. Maybe it's not just normal production. Maybe there is excess that is being made. Extra everything. Extra value, extra goods, extra food, extra shit, extra piss, extra everything, and includes extra people. Warfare, as an example, is part of this explosion of excess. There's a reason he was fascinated with like the Aztecs and how they did war. There's this like jouissance of desire exploding through the way that they could go through things. This was just that. Today we have excess in ways that are hard for me to even describe. We talk about hoarding as a disorder now. Like that's where we are. Excess is so extraordinary that we actually have disorders of keeping too much shit as a thing. We have recycle programs, trash programs. Those are the easy ones. But the entirety of the U.S. defense industry is excess. It's money that just can't sit. If you had billions upon billions of dollars, trillions of dollars that goes into the war machine that was just sitting around, it would fuck society even more. So there's this excess needs to be constantly expunged and taken care of. And this is what Bataille runs with, is this excess. The excess, it says here, to be expended derives from the astronomical amount of heat and light energy our planet receives from the sun. Various life forms, as I've always loved this, various life forms and various social forms have different ways of embodying, appropriating, organizing, concentrating, and expending their part of the excess energy flux that transitions the planet. But in all cases, it is the acts of expenditure that exercise the predominant influence on the life activity of the species or social formation. Read The Accursed Share. It's a beautiful work on this. That excess being expended. But I have a critique of it now, because I've been reading this other book. One second. I'm going to pull up the title and the cover page because it's a really beautiful thing. It is this guy. Yeah, one sec. I'll go all the way. Oh, I want to actually bookmark this page. 1 second. Bookmark you. At the top of the list. Thank you. Oh, come on. Stupid PDF reader. Pierre Klosowski's Living Currency. Living Currency is a phenomenal book from Klosowski. It's a surprisingly short read despite being incredibly dense. Incredibly dense. Klosowski talks about waste in a different way and expenditure in a different way. He takes in a different run, and it's a fascinating sort of, given that they were kind of more contemporary to each other, a divergence from Bataille. For Bataille, it's the excess is at the end of the productive process. It's a thing that how we get rid of or how we design these things, this lays it out. But there's a thing that's really weird about the way Bataille does this. Bataille's method is looking at the end result of a thing, which kind of puts us always in a position of knowing whether or not something was waste or not, knowing if not something was productive or not. It puts us in a position where we are, by definition, choosing productive or non-productive, kind of by how we define things. Less interesting. To me, that's a little bit of a flaw. It's one Klosowski jumps on, because for Klosowski, the waste is actually early in the project. It's early in the system. It's where we find efficiency. So let's say I'm building a factory. Let's say I'm building widgets or anything. When I start that, there is no factory, there is no productive process that has ever been successful on its first try. That is not how any of this works. It's just not. You have to fuck up. I've got a really interesting, I've been working on it I worked in kitchens for too long. Number one pain in the ass when I worked in kitchens, I was a fry cook at fucking Chili's and Ruby Tuesdays when I was younger, all the way through to like, I fell backwards into accidentally being a chef at a place because the guy quit. Like a lot of kitchen jobs. Number one food I love, fried chicken. Number one pain in the ass food, fried chicken. Why is it a pain in the ass? It's a pain in the ass because it takes like 9 minutes, period, to make a fucking couple of drumsticks to deliver to someone. That's why KFC always has their like flash frying and everything's ready to go, but it's still 9 minutes, 10 minutes. If they run out of legs and you want legs or spicy or original, it takes fucking 10 minutes. And it always does. And they've got fucking like crazy good everything, fastest, most efficient fryers. So figuring out how to do faster, more efficient fried chicken, that's the thing people have spent billions of dollars on probably. Maybe not that much. Millions for certain. Millions for certain. And that's waste. That is excess. But it's only waste if we don't solve it. If we solve it, then that money was production. That capital investment was production. That effort was production. It was not waste. But if we do not solve it, all of it is waste. You see this in Sabine Hassenfelder, that fucking dumb bitch. She fucking does these videos all the time about science is not solving anything. Like, cause she doesn't understand how science works. And it's one of those things that Patron and Deleuze and all these guys who would probably disagree about a good number of things. The way that science works is it is expenditure. We spend money in the sciences because we have excess. We have excess profits. We have excess everything. But if we look at it through Klosowski, our excess is being spent and seen only as waste when it's not seen as production. The people who, for example, figured out how to make microwaves. This is not a thing that was done overnight. There was a lot of wasted money doing it, but eventually that was successful. So we retroactively decide that none of that was wasteful because it went to that production. How about all of the other thousands upon billions of fucking things that never turned commercial, never found a use, or have yet to find a use? They're currently waste. That's what Sabine even says. It's waste because she's too stupid to understand that waste is necessary. Waste is part of capitalism. It's part of that upfront efficiency discovery. It is the investment of libidinal energy that goes nowhere. It has to. It always has to. Nothing works for the first try. We retroactively decide that it does. Apple claims that it invented the fucking iPhone, for God's sake. Like, that's how it ends up. You fall back on all the production that came before, and it's not wasteful and all of that. Prior to that, who gave a shit about capacitive touch? That was like a fucking, who gave a shit? Oh, we're going to have that on fucking kiosks in malls? It's big, with a fucking waste. We can make it smaller. Maybe we'll try making it smaller. Maybe we'll do this. The Apple team, there was an entire team developing a product that went fucking nowhere until they did the iPad. Because it was too big. It was going to be a tablet. It's too big. But then they did the iPad. None of that's wasted now. This thing we do, we waste. And we waste. And we decide later that it wasn't a waste. And then it changes everything. But excess is not just capital. Waste is not just capital. It's people. It's people. Capitalism produces all of us. We are made of our material conditions. Every single fucking one of you is made of your material conditions. Every single one of us is made of our material conditions. I am only that which I have been able to experience in the material conditions I have explored and I come from. That is the division in us. That is the thing that divides us and separates us and gives us all the unique views and all the unique things about life. And capitalism makes people that aren't productive. It makes severely autistic people in large numbers these days, as RFK is constantly reminding us. Certainly not because of capitalism, society at large. It's other reasons. But it produces people that are not useful. It produces old people who are not able to work. It gives us excess. And that excess is non-productive because of the rules of capital. Capital has set them up this way. The very young don't make money for us. They don't produce. The very old, they don't either. This has not changed. This has been the entirety of everything. The young are investments in their future. The old are the endings of what was an investment in their past. But they, at that time, are not useful. They are waste products. And so, what do we do with them? Well, we know what they are. So we create waste products for them too. Social Security is anti-production. It is a waste product. It is a way to maintain the system. It is a way to maintain everything that's happening. We saw what happened and what capitalism did in the 1929 fucking crash and into the 1930s. We saw this and we knew the way that the system works. We can't do something else. The FDR didn't want to turn into Russia. That was the option, by the way. That's what was happening, and that's the debate that was happening in Italy and Germany as well, thanks to the wars that we had sort of brutally, rendered unto them and the poverty we gave them. Everyone globally was wondering, what the fuck are we going to do? The option was communism or something else, a reactionary take. And FDR chose a third path. He chose to find a way, with the New Deal, to maintain it. FDR was a good capitalist. That's the thing I will call him, and I will refer to him as such. The Roosevelts were fucking rich. They were a rich family. Very rich family. They needed to maintain. They needed to maintain the system. If the system collapsed, it may yield us the Soviet Union, which at the time was not the greatest place and didn't get greatly better over time. Or it was what he saw happening in Nazi Germany, which was at the time already becoming Nazi Germany. So what was the option? It's maintaining the system that they had by making sure people didn't die. It sounds simple, and it is. And that's all Social Security is a maintenance of the capitalist system. Because without that, capitalism doesn't really give a shit about anything at its core. So where's it going to go? It doesn't care. It doesn't care. Capitalism is not like trying to get us towards Nazism. Capitalism isn't driving us towards fascism. Capitalism doesn't give a fuck. The state cares. Power cares. Conservatism cares. Reactionary fears and fascizing tendencies of desire. Representational thought. These things have desires. They have personal desires that push. Desire doesn't give a fuck. Capitalism doesn't give a fuck. We do. We like to think we do. So here we are at this weird crossroads where the maintenance of the system, which is enabling people to not die, which is seen as a bureaucratic, cold thing, is being torn apart in service of a reactionary fear. And it will lead to the collapse of everything. Because we have bad capitalists. It's an amazing thing to consider. It's an amazing thing to fucking consider. Because when we talk about, like, Marx talks about this a little bit. Deleuze gets into it, and it's a thing I've always kind of, I've had versions of this. When we talk about honest capitalists, early on in the world of capitalism, you can find people at the time of Ricardo, the time of Marx, he talks about them, who were very open about what they were doing. Hey, look, my job, like, I'm investing money. My job is to pay you as little as possible so I can make more money. Fuck off. Despicable, sure, but honest. Like, that's honest. That's kind of amazing. It's kind of amazing that someone knows that thing. I used to talk about how Pat Buchanan would be a conservative I could talk to because he's unashamed about the way the world operates. He believes in a very different place than me, but I could talk to him because we're not going to, like, disagree on the way things work. He was a racist piece of shit. And he was open about it. Like, he was that thing. He wasn't lying. He wasn't pulling a George Bush compassionate conservative bullshit. He was like, look, Mexicans, I think, are going to ruin white people's times. It's like, I mean, you're a piece of shit, but at least you're telling me what you think is going to happen. That's great. capitalists have changed. Over the last 100 years, they've changed a great deal, but in the last 50, you can see it especially in America. America, the king of the con man, who found someone at the core of this and found all of them and somehow put them all in the same room on Inauguration Day. The magic of that should be telling. But Trump is that. He is a con man. He is a liar. He is not a business person. He is not. He is not a business person. Elon, not actually a business person. If you didn't know, he's a shitty business person. But they do business practices that have basically enabled scams to work for them. They've used the legal system to work for them. Tesla, with its $10.6 billion in profit and its $11.4 billion in government subsidies that have allowed that. Wonder why he can't turn a fucking profit without the government helping him. SpaceX can't turn a profit without the government helping him. All of these things, they're shit. Because to them, they see capitalism not as, hey, look, I'm just going to pay you less money because I need to make a buck, and that's what is happening here, and I have the power. It's instead, capitalism is better for everybody. Don't you know that? Don't you know this is better for everyone? I'm doing what's better for everybody. And I think they believe it. I think Elon believes it. I think Elon's so ketamined up he'd believe almost anything. I think Trump doesn't care or know, but these are not honest capitalists. These are not honest business people. These are not that thing. These are people stuck inside of capital. These are people cucked by capital. They're capital cuckolds, and I will continue to use that phrase because I think it works really nicely with them. They are capitalist cuckolds. The way that they function, the way that they interact with the economy, the way that they interact with other people is that of a cuckold. They don't build. They don't offer vitality. They don't even fuck their own stuff. Hilariously, we have two people here who I can talk about their dicks not working, and it's hilarious because it's fucking metaphorical in ways that I can't even make sense of. Like it's almost perfect as a thing. It's too coincidental. They don't know how to do it. None of them do. Zuckerberg doesn't have a business, not a meaningful one. What is Meta's job? They sell ads. What does Google do? What do these people do? They are their own machine driving themselves. And every step of the way, all of these people, when they have their next thing happening, all they want to do is create laws that support them. The same thing that where Tesla created laws where any car manufacturer that didn't have a certain percentage of their cars sold that were electric had to pay huge sums of money to a company that did have that percent. And lo and behold, who's that company? Tesla. It's the only company. Who backed that law? Oh, Tesla. Who helped get that law passed? Oh, Tesla. Oh, fuck, that's weird. That's kind of strange that they did that because they could force that. And now you've got Anthropic and you've got OpenAI and you've got Grok and Elon all talking about how terrifying R1 and DeepSeek is. Awful, awful, open source and free. And so they're going to be introducing laws on a whim that they need to make sure they maintain their hegemony. As they do this, they can't help but try to break down things, to make things more efficient, to make things work better, to believe their own shit. To believe their own shit. When they say that they think they can make Social Security run more efficiently, I believe them. They're dumb. They're incredibly stupid, but I believe them. Someone once said, believe people when they tell you who they are. I do. I believe them. And I think as we go forward, we will see that they show, as they've shown over and over, that they not only does Trump not understand real estate or business, who is a failure across all of those, but Elon, who doesn't understand anything except getting government contracts and failing them constantly. Look at Common Sense Skeptic on YouTube. It's insane how much they've been allowed to get away with and what they're allowed to do just through simple, effective bribery and putting themselves in positions of political power. All of that is all they're doing. Bezos is doing the same thing with his fucking bullshit project. These are rich people doing rich people things who believe that the system is for the best. They believe the hype. They believe this. And it's a really weird thing because in capitalism, of all places, it is a cynical, awful hellscape where we break down meaning and no one believes anything. But somehow they do believe. Somehow they do believe. Awful. Just awful. So I recommend, just to end the theory segment on this, as sort of a note, Pierre Klosowski's Living Currency is probably my favorite work on this right now. Lyotard's Libidinal Economy touches into this in a very nice way and discusses both Klosowski and Bataille in a very nice way, as well as Deleuze. I really do recommend it, as well as Accursed Share and Society Against the State. That's my thing. Any of these texts, if you feel like joining the DGQC, they are in our library, and if not, they will be added upon your request. This is what we do. This is what all of it is. This is how we support and set things up. The DGQC, from the beginning, was founded so that way we can have a space to discuss theory in meaningful ways and find ways to do praxis in the real world with that theory. Praxis matters. What we do matters. How we respond to the world matters. And the ability for us to do it in a critical, smart, contextual way where we are not simply reacting is mattering more than fucking ever. Please join the Quarantine Collective, discord.gg/DGQC. If you like what I do, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/DGQC, and you can support there. Always works really nice. And of course, super chats like our Jeshoa O. Genuinely, I can't tell you how absolutely stunned I am. And I'm humbled by the $50 super chat. That was literally made my brain go. I hope I didn't get too off course with it though. So it's hard not to. Because all of this comes back. All of this comes back to the way desire is repressed within capital. And for that, I don't think there's a better book on it than Anti-Oedipus from Gilles Deleuze and Felix guattari. So please, give it a read, join our readings, and give it a shot. I think that may be the stream for the night. That's a nice solid 3 hours, and it's a really complex thing. I'm going to leave it open and I'm going to ask, where in there would you like me to focus more? Where can I spend more time? And is there any major question where you're like, if you need time to digest, that's kind of what I'm assuming, because it is a lot at once. Where would you like me to spend a little bit more time? Because I'm happy to do so. Not tonight, but this way I can aim that next stream. Because as much as it is hopeless, and I do, just as my public service announcement, you know somebody who will be affected by the upcoming cuts to Social Security. I don't care where you live in the world. You know someone online. You know someone in the real world. You are related to someone. You have a parent, a grandparent, a cousin, a friend, a guild member in World of Warcraft, a competitor in Dota, a friend, an enemy, someone who will be affected by this in a profound way. And I'm not talking about in the knock-on effects. I'm talking about in the direct, immediate, absolute effects. Bird Boy, my hand is probably going to be... Talk about Sabine? Yeah. You know what? You know what? Because of the absolutely lovely response and setup, I think let's see what we got for Sabine on the YouTubes. She's so fucking awful. It's hard for me to even. She's awful. She is just, and again, I'm not even like a science person. but she's so fucking terrible. I can't, I don't actually know if I can do this tonight because my brain is dying. But Joshua, I will add a Sabine video to my playlist, and tomorrow and Sunday I'm going to be streaming again, and I'll probably do a little bit more relaxed stream tomorrow and Sunday. Next week, this slot is going to be used as a marathon. I'm going to be going through one of the more horrifying videos that has been done. I've got a little playlist of all these fun things. I love some of these things. But there is this fucking asshole. This video is the worst video on anti-oedipus I've ever seen in my entire life. And it is worse in a way that is very difficult for me to describe, because every sentence is wrong. And it's hard to do every sentence wrong in a book that is literally like open the way it is and that has so much secondary literature. But there is very little in here that has to do with the book Anti-Oedipus or Gilles Deleuze and Felix Guattari. So, as we get closer to, and we're 15 days away right now, from the 5-year anniversary of the Quarantine Collective, 5 fucking years I've been doing a reading of Anti-Oedipus, I felt like a really good way to mark that would be going back to a thing we did 4 years ago and talk about plastic pills and his video on anti-oedipus. And it is, it's this good. That's how good it is. So that'll be at some point in the next week or so. It's hard for me to even describe how much I hate it. Joshua, it's because these people don't do these videos to be understood. I mean, this is the challenge with kind of the setup is you're right. I'm certainly not going to disagree with what you're saying conceptually, but the horrifying nature of all of this is that people watch his video and they go to the world and they say, I understand Deleuze and Guattari, and they talk about it. How do I know this? Because we get them all the time, and they're like, wait, Plastic Pills said that Deleuze wants us all to be schizo, or that we should be more politically schizo, or the number of people who had a fucking heart attack when he brought up my favorite, like the worst thing is when he talks about deterritorialization, and his example is the native tongues, which is the most commercialized fucking music shit that there is. It's leave it to a fucking white guy as far as I'm concerned. Like everyone's like, what the fuck? The rage inside of the Discord was hilarious. It is ruthless. And Somebody War, thank you for the $5. This, I will put it towards an appropriate beverage towards the end of the video. I have a series of just lovely, lovely beers that I've been saving, and maybe I'll do a vote thing and a tasting. We'll do a beer review during it because someone should learn something. This is like the worst fucking video. It's hard for me to even describe the anger I experience when I'm like watching it. It is hard for me to describe.
You and I gotta be more schizo to be politically effective.
Just that. That's one sentence. It's not as a part of a sentence. It's not even the beginning of a sentence. I just went halfway through. There is so much wrong with that statement. It's kind of incredible. First off, the schizophrenic as clinical entity, as they state very explicitly, has no social connections at all. So it's not that you're more schizo and you can be politically relevant. It's the opposite, that the schizophrenic is the wasted edges of society. They are the excess, as I was just talking about. So no, it's not that you need to be more schizo in order to do that. In fact, you being more schizo is problematic and actually produced by capitalism, as they say, like Prel and like other things. So instead, they advocate quite a different position and in fact warn greatly against that. So One fucking sentence. And I could go on for 20 fucking minutes. This is a 35-minute video that will take me probably 8 to 10 hours to get through, and I will be doing it in a full shot straight through next weekend in honor of the 5th anniversary of the Quarantine Collective. Not tonight. I know. Not tonight. Not tonight. Sorry. It ain't my jam to do that. There are a lot of, I've been given so many of these like little deleuze videos.
Le rêve de ceux qui rêvent.
They always start with this video. Oh, it's heartbreaking. There's this, I'll just read it aloud. The dream of those who dream concerns those who are not dreaming. And why does this concern them? Because as soon as someone else dreams, there is danger. Okay. Do you want to know how far you can take something out of context for deleuze? It's kind of really difficult to go as far as this does, unless you're Plastic Pills, who does it all the time. So that quote, if you don't know, is actually a series of lectures he gave on the creative act in Paris regarding his book on cinema. He's not talking about dreams and psychoanalytic thinking and the big other. The sentence ends with, and that's the one everyone loves, if you get stuck in the dream of the other, you are fucked. And everyone's like, wow, must be about the big other, and that the other people's dreams getting stuck in them is fantasy. Go Google, you'll find 1 million people giving this response. And it has nothing to do with any of that at all. It has to do with film theory. It has to do with film theory and how time operates within film theory, very particularly in Manelli, I think is who he's talking about. Manelli wrote about dreams, and Vincente Manelli. And the idea of dreams for Manelli was less that dreams are like psychological experiences, but instead that they are worlds that can trap you. Think of the term that's used by Deleuze, Klosowski, Nietzsche even, as delirium. The thing that happens is like when we have films, and Manelli made films. This is about films. It's about films. Dreams in films are presented as vibrant, as these ridiculous environments. Think of it as though they're boring now, but if you've ever seen like a dream sequence, like even like when I was growing up in Wayne's World, it was like, ooh, dream sequence, like that kind of shit, because it's so boring and shit and trite in film to do now. But this idea of like dream sequences, these ridiculously overdone, colorful environments that have their own logic and danger and weirdness. The thing that happens in all of these is that the characters are consumed by the dream itself. They're in danger of being trapped. And in the films he made, there were characters that got trapped in other people's dreams that got fucked by being trapped in those dreams, like a Twilight Zone episode. Do you know how far out of fucking context you have to be in order to fuck that up? He's referencing Manelli's films where a guy was trapped in someone else's dream. It has nothing to do with your psychological condition in any capacity. It has nothing to do with your dreams or how dreams work for people. It has to do with how dreams work in films and the way in films that they are portrayed. If you get trapped in the dream of the other, you're fucked. That's a very normal thing. A Mouth of Madness, for example, Jacob's Ladder, like the dream of the other where it's not your dream. This is a very normal thing in film. Don't be trapped in someone else's dream or you get fucked. There's a good video on, there's a good couple episodes of American Dad that do this extremely well. Getting trapped in Stan's dream or Francine's dream or Roger's. Fantastic episodes. But that thing has nothing to do with psychoanalytic thought in the big other. Zero. And yet, let's go to the Google. Deleuze, quote, trapped in the dream of the other. And let's add those infamous words. Look, first link. I think it has to do with the fact you'll never have access or any chance to change the idea that somebody else has over you. You're fucked because they can shape their imaginary about you at their will. You're trapped on somebody else's conception of you. There's nothing you can do. I would tie it to master-slave dialectics. You, in a way, inhabit somebody else's 14 upvotes. I deleted my response right below this. And it's, by the way, the correct one. Like, it's the correct response. I fucking hate this so much. This is the first result and the top vote. Has nothing to do with the quote in any capacity at all. Here's someone who gets it right, and it's not the first result. Wildly out of context, Deleuze is trying to think about the nature of creative acts. He's also thinking about his own philosophy. There's all of this amazing work that someone did typing this out. And Google doesn't put it as the featured one. So our world is ruining itself slowly. Yeah, no one will read it. No one will read it. No one will read that. Are you kidding me? It's really... This is why it's like, there is a lot of bad Deleuze content out there. And it's, when I was doing the Nietzsche video with Philosophy Tube, who is shit wall to wall, and I don't fucking care. Like, shit wall to wall. The setup, I was being very nice when I did that, where I was like, at least her videos on like non-philosophy stuff, I don't give a fuck anymore. Like, what an awful community, awful group, just terrible. And she's kind of a weirdo. I've learned way too much about her that I didn't want to know. The people were starting sending me links. I'm like, I'm good. I'm fucking good. I joke with Sunday that before, like when Sunday first hit up the QC and posted, I watched him. Good theory. It was interesting content because it was not the normal shit I saw very often. It was thoughtful and wanting to learn about theory and discussing the state and other stuff. And it was like, as far as I knew, no one was really doing that. I was like, great. But in time, over time, I have a regret. Because now I know so many people's names and their personal interrelations that I only know through his channel. And somehow I can't stop. And it's like, I don't know. Fuck, I hate that. But anyway, as I was doing the one on Nietzsche, someone was like, hey, why don't you do these for Deleuze? And they started sending links. And it's like, the problem with Deleuze readings, and there's a couple, Plastic Pills is, I think, a unique special one. This one is Deleuze Philosophy, who generally is very good. Like, generally is very good. The opening of that and the way that they talk about things and the way that they sort of do their thing, I have issues with how they simplify, but it's not an easy thing to get across. So my critique of them is not going to be interesting. Someone wanted me to go over this video, and it's like, like, they're doing a thing, and they're trying to conceptualize Deleuze in 18 minutes. They don't do badly. They just don't do good. And that would not be fun to watch. That's not interesting for anyone. And then there's this, like the Left Library, which is like, holy shit. Like, this is their reading of Capitalism, Schizophrenia explained in 10 minutes. This is not good. But it's not good in a way that is not interesting. Like, they read quotes and they have a lot of B-roll, and I'm not even sure there's a real person who's behind it. Because they kind of say things that are not really correct. And I can't tell if it's AI generated, because it's wrong in that way that's like disconnected from any of the meaning, as if someone actually read any of these things. Freud's approach is like, all desires are funneled through this familial triangle, creating a narrow and deterministic view of human psychology. That's not, that would not be at the top of my list of ways to put this. It's not wrong, but it's not right. And that's what you see, I think, with most Deleuze shit, is it's not wrong, but it's not right. And you end up in a place where in order to discuss a thing, in order for me to critique it, I have to kind of go to brass tacks. For this, I would have to, like, they're wrong about Freud. Freud didn't think of it this way. And their critique of Freud is not that he thinks of it this way, it's that he created a system that utilizes this trinary version of symbolization through which desire early on is formed and through which we find the tablecloth of everything folded back onto itself into a triangle with 3 + 1 corners as the phallus. But these are not easy concepts in themselves, but they're not this simple either. And so you end up in a really weird, like, how do I respond or even say any of this shit in a meaningful way? Yeah. Whenever I've asked Deleuze questions, ChatGPT, it spits out garbage like that. It will. Claude 3.7 is the first AI I've ever had that responded to me where I went, if someone wrote this to me, I probably would go, it's not bad. Like that's a move. Now, again, you have to remember, why is it able to do that? Oh, because it's able to refine the probabilistic space that it's pulling that from. It has no grasp of any of these things. AI doesn't work like that. Instead, by refining it and having it learn the parts that it needs to grab, it's grabbing from the right sources and the right places in a much more probabilistic, reasonable space. But they don't care about that. So there's this. This is problematic. That's a challenge. It's just tough. And then here, someone sent me this, 1.5 hours. And I think someone sent it because you look at her and you look at this, you're like, well, this is going to be weird. Is she? No, actually, she's kind of good. It's kind of really good, actually. And there's a lot of really, but I don't want to do 1.5 hours of her thing where I go, yeah. And that's my reaction. So I only have a handful. I'm hoping Philosophy Tube does a video on Deleuze, because that would be hilarious and that would be great content. But otherwise, these are fine. And when I do them, I'm going to end up jumping around and going, oh, well, let's do mini critique. No, it's not, I mean, the subtitles are terrible. But she's actually correct about a lot of the stuff she says. It's good. I was actually I was very surprised. It's unique. Her presentation of it is also, you can tell, not off of a secondary source. She's actually very much coming up with an interpretation of her own that is in line with the interpretations I've seen in my own. So it's really good, which is nice. And it's kind of like, cool. So that's not interesting. It's tough. It's tough. Manifold looks like on Transformers, perhaps KQV mattices and neurals do think when you have a billion. No, they don't. The fact that there are joint embedding spaces where vision and language models share the same. There's no such thing as a vision model. Vision models are based on language models. Language models are utilized. There's no vision model without a language model as part of it. That's how they work. They're captioned, and they're a reverse captioning machine. That's how every single one of them operates. They're at the base a token system that utilizes that same underlying thing. They don't have a system outside of that that I'm aware of. It may exist. I've seen all of them. That's nothing I've seen. So all of this stuff comes back to the same thing. And also at the base of them, there's humans. No matter what anyone says or how much they lie, humans are being used in the training of these models and the refining of these models as they go. Am I asserting there isn't a model that's jointly trained? So I would ask, do you believe computers can see images? I'm curious. Like, how do they see images? Do they have an eye and they see things that like we do? Or are they is JPEG an interpreter that basically unfurls a different thing in bits and bots that are seen as pixels, and the pixels have values, and those values are what are seen in stable diffusion models that utilize various content and quality and hue saturation values in order to determine the content of them, and that data is what is actually put inside of it. computer vision models utilize text. Like at the base, none of them are on their own just a vision thing. They don't see things. They don't know that. They know an image has a thing because there's text that's based off it, that's captioning it. That's how this works at the base of it. That's how it works at the base. How does a vision model have a person? It doesn't know what the edges of a person are. It doesn't even know the shape of a person. It's able to do that because it's trained on huge amounts of models and noise reduction sort of reversals. This is the base of it. If you decompress the layers to show what they look like at exports, no, that's not how it works. If you decompress it and you look at it, you're not seeing the same thing the computer sees. That's not how vision models operate either. They don't have there's not an eyeball that's looking at the image. It's data. There's data. There's no such thing as a JPEG that's an image on your hard drive. It's an interpreter for data, and it's shown on a graphics card. But that rendering doesn't create a rendering that a computer then has an eyeball that looks at it. It's seeing the data. It doesn't have an eye. So when you decompress or you remove things in a way that we can see, yes, it looks like an image. It doesn't mean it's an image. It doesn't. Just like tokens aren't words. The tokens in ChatGPT and all of this that's at the base of it are not words or letters. They are linguistic elements, they claim. I wouldn't actually use that phrasing because we can't turn it into a language that we're able to sort of make sense of or that would work linguistically. But those base elements, that's all that's working and flying through there. It's tokens. It isn't letters. It isn't words. It isn't meaning. It isn't reason. They don't reason. Across the board, they don't reason. None of them do. So, but do you think in words? I'm at a disadvantage. I actually don't have an internal monologue, but I'm able to speak in words. And if a person says a word, I'm able to envision it and think of it and do that. I'm able to communicate in words. I'm able to talk about denotation, signification, and other things. I'm able to have signification that extends over extraordinary periods and also talk about nuance within every element of that. But also I'm able to go around words and utilize graphism or imagery or representation or even pure abstract thought that has itself no words or direct connotation, but I'm able to find poetry that plays to it. An AI will not be able to tell you why baby shoes never worn for sale. Baby shoes for sale, never worn. Why that 6-word story is the shortest sad story ever written. No AI can tell you that. They can because it's written somewhere and they're using that. But if they'd never seen that phrase before, you're like, explain this to me. They will go, oh, this looks like a want ad, blah, blah, blah. But that next layer, it won't synthesize that. It won't come to it itself. It has to have had that information put into it already. And even children don't need that. That's not how people work. People are able to take in new information and synthesize it in very different ways. Completely different setup. One of the great challenges of AI and machine learning, and it has been since the beginning, is the threat of the stochastic parrot. There's a reason they use this term, because it seems like, and it is specifically programmed to respond conversationally to people, so it seems like a person. That's it. When you remove that, which you really can't do very easily in these large models, you have to do it yourself. When you do that, you're able to see literally that it is not reasoning at all, and that it's just spitting shit out and not trying to be conversational. It's just random. But when you have that, you will respond in conversation. You will be kind. You will ask questions. You will do these things. You will use this parts of language. The instruction set that these models are built in and trained on, that's how you end up where we are today, where people are stupid enough to think that OpenAI actually almost had an AI escape, which isn't a fucking thing. It's not a fucking thing. It's not a fucking thing. Or you think that, oh, I was talking that awful article. I talked to ChatGPT and it was depressed. I didn't know AIs could be depressed. It wasn't depressed. It wasn't depressed. If you remove the commands that are added to it to seem like it's conversational, You can see all of that. But we add those. Why? Because it tricks people. Because it tricks people. And you have people who, NVIDIA programmers, who will post on Twitter and say how amazing it is that Sora and other AI video generators have a total understanding of physics, and they must do physics modeling, which is stupid. That's stupid, and it's a stupid thing to say. Because, again, no, none of that is accurate. It's laughable on its face. But because we have things put to us in a certain way, it makes it seem as if it comes from an intelligence. When we have a note written, and if you open a fortune cookie and it says, "Please help me, I'm trapped in the back." Do you think someone wrote that? It's the first thing you do. It's the first thing you think. Someone must have written this. You presume what you're reading was written. You presume what you're hearing was said by something, because that's how it works. But it's not. It's a trick. And those people who wrote that big piece on stochastic parrots, these are the people who also happen to be the heads of the ethics departments at Microsoft AI, OpenAI, ethics. And we're all fired right around the same time because they made a stink about how unethical it was to lie to people and trick them like this. And now we have a lawsuit that's going all the way to Supreme Court, no doubt, because a ChatGPT powered bot convinced a kid to kill himself because he wasn't able to tell the difference, because it's not a person and it's not an intelligence. It's a probabilistic machine on the level of Clippy, just very advanced. But people don't know that because they're taught otherwise, and they aren't taught how to think through this, or how reasoning works, or how symbolic logic, even at a base level, functions, so they can take apart what is being said and show that it's nonsense, even if it seems like it's not, because they give the benefit of the doubt to a lot of really fucking stupid people every day. So when ChatGPT says something that's kind of stupid, they go, "Oh, it's just like all those other fucking morons I know." And they assume it's intelligent. It's not. It's all lies. It's all lies. It's all lies. AI is useful. That's the worst part. Because I'm not going to be the guy who's a Luddite screaming how it's going to destroy everything the same way social media did. Because everyone's really far too stupid to be able to use this effectively, and no one thinks critically. So it will kill us all. Certainly. But if we all did have the ability to use it properly, it could send us forward into time in ways that are hard to even describe. I built, my code production has been out of the fucking moon. The number of Git commits I had prior to using AI to code was like 2 a year, and they weren't that impressive. But in the span of like 3 months, like 50 fucking individual products, all the way to the end, websites built from scratch, that I was able to code at the end because that base file, that base thing was able to be built and given to me, so I could just recode and add the stuff that I wanted to. So I don't have to learn every stupid fucking library. I don't have to memorize every JavaScript new nuance of garbage that's out there. I can just go, make me this, do that, and it does it. And it's fucking great. And then you can code on top of it. It's not great at coding, but it's fucking good enough if you know decently what you're doing. Super useful. Super useful for regurgitating notes. If you've got a whole big meeting, super useful to synthesize that, find parts in it that are interesting so you don't have to go through and make notes yourself every fucking time. It's great for finding ways to reformulate thoughts you have and sound your own thoughts back to you so you can go, fuck, I'm being really stupid. Or, fuck, I need a better way to phrase this. Finding out where the ability to use it is good, but we don't have the ability because we're too fucking dumb. As a people. Just awful. We're just too stupid. It's a shame. But that's humanity. That's what we do. Queen of Swords. So, I'm actually going to be doing a video on tarot and the I Ching. Because I don't believe in woo. I don't believe in woo at all. But I do believe in the usefulness of the random. So the Stoics, when they, once upon a time, there was this group called the Stoics. They kind of created what we may know as astrology today. The idea of astrology was a little bit different than I think what most people realize. Astrology was not simply this idea of, hey, maybe the planets make us the way that we are. It's the opposite. So maybe the planets don't make us the way that we are. And instead, what if we used things that were outside of my everyday life to determine what I ought to do next? When you go through life, you go through your normal day, you talk to the same people, you go down the same streets, you react to the same stuff, and that same stuff has you doing the same things because that's what you're able to react to. There's not a lot of randomness in a normal life that people lead. It's not how it works. So how do you determine what you're going to do next? Well, you ask someone, and then they tell you the sensible thing to do. But then you just do the sensible thing, which is usually the same thing. Fuck that. What if, instead, you had a thing telling you what to do that wasn't related to causation at all? What if you could divorce causation from destiny, fate, whatever you want to use? What if you want to talk instead about all the randomness and then have your brain bounce around some things, find a new path? The I Ching is this. The I Ching is not some fatalist, oh, we know how the world works and this is the setup. The idea for all of it is you read the stars, you read the signs, you read the tea leaves, you read whatever, fortune tellers. It's not that you are being shown the causative reality of things. It's a positivist view. It's instead, these are random things that are meant to give you a new angle, an askew view of your own existence, your own experience, your own life. And maybe that randomness turns you that way. That's interesting shit. That's an interesting way to consider all of that. That's an interesting way to consider how we deal with anything. Everyone who's in this area of town, who's born in this zip code, here's where you're going to end up. Everyone who's born under this sign, here's where you're going to end up. No. Take the lesson that's told. The I Ching does it, I think, better than anything, but tarot cards are a fun way to play with it. But it's the idea of the randomness. And the randomness and a story being made from that. Because like AI, and again, if you're aware you're doing it, but we like lying, if you're aware you're doing it, then the hallucinations of AI can be useful. I hate to tell you this. When people are wrong, they say something dumb, think of it as that moment that always ends every episode of House MD, where someone says something random, unrelated to the case, and he goes, oh, and he runs. Like Sherlock Holmes moment. That shit is the randomness of life that gives us other ways to bounce that we normally wouldn't. But we do this awful thing where we go, yeah, well, all of it is causative. I'm causing it. It's all part of me. The world's for me. Everything's about me. I'm a happy little ego fuck. Solipsistic pieces of shit, one and all. And then we go, yeah, no, actually the planets are there for me. And actually they do determine where I'm at. And also these tarot cards are for me and they know everything because everyone knows everything about me. And we ruin it. Because we pretend that the tarot cards are being said by someone, or that the I Ching is said by someone, or that the AI has reasons and causation and understanding. And it fucking doesn't. It doesn't. These things are useful. They're interesting. There's this insane clown posse. Only a handful of you even thought I'd ever say that. Jump Steady. Violent J is one of the two of that. His brother, Jump Steady. Is his nickname. He and his friends made this game called Morton's List. Morton's List had a 30-sided die. And what it was is it was a book of shit to do. And you'd roll one number to determine the first, which is like the area of things you would do. And you'd roll another to determine the specific thing. And then you roll another to do modifiers on that thing. And what you would end up with after you do these rolls is the group would have an activity and a goal that was determined randomly and through these three things. And the weirdness of it is because it was random, you'd end up doing stuff that you kind of sort of wanted to do, but didn't even think about because it wasn't in your wheelhouse. It wasn't in your setup. One night we were playing and we got, I can't remember exactly the modifiers, but it ended up in a position where we went to a toy store and we bought walkie-talkies. And we all went to, there's a couple bars. This was in Colorado. Colorado's a huge drunk driving problem. We'd all lost friends to drunk drivers. And specifically, this thing was about like justice and keeping people safe against their own will. It was kind of like that thing. And someone mentioned, they're like, you know what we could do is we could go stake out bars and drive people home. And if they refuse, getting them a ride or making sure that the police are called to escort them. And we did that for like 2 hours. And like we ended up saving, no doubt, like it was like 12 people. It's fucking crazy how many people, like when I say drunk, I mean like falling over as they got to their car drunk. The people who we couldn't even tell, we didn't even interrupt. That thing is a really weird, how did we end up there? Choices? Sure. Our own desire? Sure. Our own wants? No. No one was there, but thanks to this randomness, we ended up in a place we didn't expect. Randomness is missing from our lives because when we look back at why we're doing what we're doing or how we're doing what we're doing, or I sit here to go, hey, I'm here because all of you like listening to me and I'm very smart. I'm very smart. I am a very smart man. And because of these reasons, you will continue to listen to me. And I'm going to say next things that also encourage this to be stable. I'm going to wrap myself in this image over and over and over. I'm going to be Jordan Peterson. And I'm going to just continually wrap myself in the same thing because his impetus and drive are sort of consumed in that play. Without the randomness, you will continue like a marble rolling down a hill that is just infinite, like Uncut Gems, the movie is about this. It's about the momentum of life and how without intervention, without true randomness, you end up in a place that you've determined. The ball begins rolling downhill. That randomness is powerful. Powerful. And it's a thing we've lost. It's a thing we've very much lost. That's why D&D is so popular. Games are popular that have RNG. That edge of things we miss because everything in our lives is so determined. So determined. So determined. Ugh. I feel like taking a nap. Fun thing you can use encoders to embed a data set. Oh, you're talking about. There's a lot of really interesting stuff you can do with this tech. I believe tech is interesting. I believe it's fascinating. I use AI art and music. This is AI music stems combined with some time I spent in Ableton with some of my own shit. There's a lot in there. I made a music video that I posted on my personal. One sec. Let's. And it's a really simple sort of setup when you get into like what this looks like or how it sort of operates. Let me kill the music real quick. But music, everything, if you can use these things to give you different directions, play in a space, it puts you in weird spots.
Have you seen the lights? They sparkle and gleam. In this endless molten night, feels like I'm lost in a dream. Every shop is calling.
I'm a fan of synth pop, if you can't tell. The really weird thing that ends up happening when you play with this, though, is what are you going to do with it? What are you putting your mark on? How are you combining these things? If you rely on the AI to do the whole thing, it will end up being kind of shit. And it always will be. Literally forever. There's no way you'll ever get to the point where it's like, I want a good Sonic movie. And then like an hour-and-a-half movie will come out. There's just not a thing. What do you play with? How are you going to make it something? And the ability to play with archetypes you like, things you like, chase different directions. It's not the best video. I have no judgment that this is shit in its own way, but I find it fascinating how much I kind of ended up liking what I made and how it sort of played with a lot of the tropes I like. I ended up re-editing and putting it together. I like digital effects. I mean, if you haven't seen my other shit, I really like artifacts. I'm a big fan of fucking artifacts. But how they interplay and how they work, these things are tools. That's all they are. When we got televisions and analog signals and the synth came out, everyone in music was like, "It's fucking disgusting. You're cheating." There were purists about that. But you could bend and play with those signals. Oh, you can only get one sound. When you press C, it's one sound. It's like, what the fuck? And it's like, no, you can do a lot more than that. You just have to play with it. And the people who just stuck with it and was like, well, I just like playing on that. It's just a little Casio keyboard. No one gives a fuck. But I have a Euro rack set up here that is literally born out of that from the Moog motherfuckers. And that shit is wild. It's the same thing. Tools. Learn how they work. Fuck with them. Do not take only their output. Their output is shit. Wall to wall. Use the sequences. Use the way they work and how they set up. Play with that. That's the win. That's the win there. That's the win. Kid. I go to look at your channel. Insomnia. Do I have a Euro rack? I have I can't really turn the camera to show it, but I have my Moog Mother 32 Subharmonicon DFAM in one setup. And then I've got like 9 modules and then a few others in different places. So yeah, I like my Euro rack. And I have video synth stuff too. I have a lot of video synth shit. Because if you couldn't tell, I was fucking with that in that video. So it's a lot of fun. If you need a good thing, this is the Mismatcher Deluxe. Freedom Enterprise is freedomenterprise.pt. I met him when I was in Portugal. The lovely dude. Him and his girlfriend who do the whole thing. And it's immaculate quality, like the stuff that they make. If you like fucking with signals, see, now we've got Inception. So, speaking of, I will be sending you to this lovely gentleman. Kid has been doing a lot of very good stuff lately, and I'm a big fan, to be very frank. So I'm going to make sure that you get a chance to go see some Kid today. So when you get there, say Brooke said hello, and that he loves you very, very much, non-sexually mostly. With that, I'm going to say